Well, good morning. Today is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs, absent. Commissioner Decker,
Here.
Commissioner Bonner,
Here.
Commissioner Kalanche,
Here.
Commissioner Sobran.
Here.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Before we begin today's agenda, a few procedural reminders. All public comment will be heard on item 2 on the agenda, to which we will dedicate a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. And at the request of the speaker can be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Our first item on today's agenda is the report of the Chief of Police. Chief Moore, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Vice President Decker, Commissioners, Inspector General, Mr. City Attorney, and Mr. T-Fank. As I do each week, I'm going to give a brief summary of our COVID-19 update, particularly regarding department operations, as well as significant events, our crime, and our personnel strength. Regarding this past week on the number of confirmed COVID cases, we increased an overall number of 12. That's 3,154 of our personnel have now tested positive for COVID. That's an increase of 11 sworn and 1 civilian. Regarding our work status at home personnel, we saw an improvement of this where we have now 111 personnel at home. That's an increase. That's a decrease of 7 personnel. And we've seen an additional 22 of our personnel now return to work, return to duty. That number now stands at 3,066. Regarding mobile vaccinations, that engagement still continues, and we now have vaccinated 465 additional members of the organization utilizing that resource. Next area I want to report on it goes to our vaccination status. And as of this morning, we're still collecting a number of earlier declined to state or defaulted to state. So our numbers are improving where our overall vaccination rate now is nearly 65%. That number stands at 7,810 of our personnel are fully vaccinated, with 1,771 that are not vaccinated, 338 that are partially vaccinated. Regarding the city's responsibility that each employee report their vaccination status, we have approximately 18% of our personnel that we've yet to identify what their vaccination status is. That's 2,151 of our personnel. Last week, a second notice was issued. It's actually an order by me to each employee that had not identified their vaccination status, that's required by October 20th as a deadline for not just the department, but all city employees, and individuals who fail to report their vaccination status by that date will be subject to disciplinary action. The past week, in our efforts to continue to encourage our personnel to take advantage of the vaccination as a means of safeguarding themselves or lives of their family, as well as their partner in the public in which we serve, we posted an LA County Department of Health Services webinar, as well as an accompanying fact sheet, some talking points that details the true benefits and risks of the COVID-19 vaccine. Its effort is to continue to dispel rumors and the continued disinformation that we see broadcasted across social media and on other sources. Lastly, the city officials continue to meet with labor units across all city bargaining units on the vaccine mandate, including what constitutes reasonable accommodations should an individual be granted a sincerely held religious belief exemption or a medical exemption. What constitutes reasonable accommodations as to the department's ability and the city's ability to find alternative work assignments for those individuals, as well as consequences for those who fail to be vaccinated or have an exemption granted. Moving next, I'm going to report on, well, before I get to reporting on the categorical use of force, this past 2 weeks, actually, yesterday as well as last week, I continued our discussions meeting with various journalist organizations and our discussions about their rights to ensure that they're protected, as well as provided access during protests and demonstrations. I want to thank the members of the RTNA, that's the Radio, Television, and News Association, as well as the town hall with question and answers that were provided by the National Association of Black Journalists. And those efforts and engagement will continue as we move forward in our efforts to ensure that, again, journalists, this sacred rights, the need and importance of them in a democratic setting are protected, and our men and women respect that and honor our relationship with journalists. Next, I'm going to talk about categorical uses of force that occurred over this past period. I'm going to report on 3 separate instances, all of them involving individuals that are experiencing, we believe, mental health episodes or crises. And the first incident occurred on October 1st. And this was about 7:38 at night in the 1200 block of South Harvard Boulevard. And that is in the Olympic area of the city of Los Angeles. I'm going to take just a moment and Madam Vice President, I've lost all the video feeds. I just want to ensure that we're still broadcasting.
Yes, Chief, we're still broadcasting. We're still recording. I see no difficulties on our end.
Okay, very good. Just doing a sound check.
Absolutely.
All right, so back to the October 1st event, which was a Leary event. On that date at approximately 7:38 at night, Olympic patrol officers responded to a radio call of a male with mental illness. Upon arrival, they met with the individual's parents outside the residence and was told that the individual, later identified as Mr. Tony Yoon, a male Asian, 43 years of age, was throwing items at the parents and threatening to kill them. The parents advised that the individual suffered from mental illness and may have access to a loaded shotgun inside the residence. During the investigation, Mr. Yoon exited the residence and reportedly threw a golf club at officers, nearly striking one of them. He then went back inside his residence and refused to exit. Notification was made to Metropolitan Special Weapons and Tactics for a barricaded suspect. And while awaiting their arrival, Mr. Yoon apparently set fire to his own home. At one point, again, he briefly exited his residence and then attempted to go back inside while the fire was ongoing. Officers fired several 40mm less lethal rounds in an effort to stop him from harming himself by returning to the home. The suspect was struck by the less lethal launcher rounds and was taken into custody. Mr. Yoon suffered a laceration to his left index finger, which was a result of one of those rounds striking him, and was taken by a rescue ambulance to a local hospital and is in stable condition. He was admitted into the hospital to treat the injury to his hand. When officers sustained a minor injury to his knee while taking Mr. Yoon into custody, he was treated at a local facility, and I'm grateful that he was released without further complication. The Force Investigation Division responded to the scene, and they will investigate this. The overarching charge that waits Mr. Yoon is assault with a deadly weapon, which is a felony. Regarding the second event, which occurred in Newton area at nearly the same time, simultaneously, this was an officer-involved shooting, which involved the Newton officers who responded at approximately 7 o'clock at night to a radio call of a female who was reportedly experiencing mental illness. Upon arrival, the officers learned that the individual, later identified as Evelyn Del Rio, female Hispanic, 31 years of age, was inside the residence, was holding her 10-year-old son at knife point. Officers attempted to establish communications with Ms. Del Rio to get her to exit her residence and also release her son. However, she refused. Notifications again were made to Metropolitan SWAT for a barricaded suspect, and while awaiting the arrival of those officers, Ms. Del Rio reportedly began stabbing her son with a knife, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Ms. Del Rio was struck by gunfire and was taken into custody, and her knife was recovered at the scene. Her and her 10-year-old son, who sustained multiple stab wounds to his upper back, abdomen, and neck, were transported from the scene by a rescue ambulance, and I'm happy to report that both are in stable condition. No one else is injured during this ordeal. Force Investigation Division responded and are to the scene and will investigate this incident. The mother will face attempt murder charges as a result of this incident. And again, that information is still awaiting her discharge from the hospital. Third event is an officer-involved shooting that happened on the 2nd of October at 11 o'clock in the morning in the area of Highland Avenue and Hollywood Boulevard. There, at approximately 11 o'clock in the morning, a 19-year-old foreign exchange student was visiting Los Angeles and was walking in the area of Hollywood Boulevard and Highland. Apparently, at that point, an individual later identified as Gersha Alaverdina approached her and without provocation, stabbed her in the stomach with a knife. Witnesses nearby alerted a uniformed sergeant who quickly located the suspect and requested a backup. Additional officers arrived and attempted to verbalize with the individual. However, he refused to comply. While still holding the knife, the individual advanced towards the officer and an officer-involved shooting occurred. Nearly simultaneously, another officer who was equipped with a less lethal beanbag shotgun also fired a round, we believe at this point, multiple rounds. The individual was struck by the gunfire and the beanbag rounds. He was taken into custody without further incident, and his knife was recovered at the scene. He and the victim were transported by a rescue ambulance. And again, I'm happy to report that the victim of this stabbing is in stable condition. Mr. Gersha Alaverdina was later released from the hospital and was booked for attempt murder. A Force Investigation Division responded and will investigate this incident. Of note in all three of these instances is a history in each instance of individuals having experienced prior episodes of mental health crises, treatments, responses by the department, as well as in addition to our MEU unit, efforts by our camp unit to establish a long-term recovery for all these individuals. We are continuing our conversations with DMH, Department of Mental Health, to understand what added steps could have been taken by our mental health system that would have prevented these types of crises from escalating to this point. These matters concern me, as I do, I'm sure, every Angelino, as these officers are thrust into these very dangerous situations with individuals who are violent and attacking others and are forced to make these split-second decisions. While decisions have not been made as to the tactics, the use of deadly force, or the propriety of these instances, and all that will wait further instances, I just want to draw attention, and as I close on remarks on these three instances, about the continued presence of individuals experiencing mental health crises and the challenges we all have for the continued safety of Los Angeles. Move next to report on the number of categorical or officer-involved shootings that we've had. We remain at 3 in custody deaths year to date, and our last year that number was 2, and our 4-year average is just over 3. In regards to total officer-involved shootings, we now stand at 27, which was, as a more point of reference, the number of officer-involved shootings we had last year. Last year, the number at this point was 20. We have 9 fatals this year, with 6 of that were fatal last year. Our 4-year averages were 25, just over 25 officer-involved shootings at this point of the year for total officer-involved shootings, and just over 9.5 as far as fatals. Moving to our crime picture, looking at this last week, we have seen some improvement in our shooting violence over this last month. However, we've lost ground and continue to lose ground in our earlier reductions in property crime. And this is particularly being influenced by auto thefts. Regarding our violent crime, last week, you may recall, well, actually last week I did not provide a report due to my absence as attending an employee funeral. But last week we stood with 54 additional homicides compared to the same period last year. That number has been reduced to 49. It's still a 47% increase this year versus last. We are at a 5.8% increase in violent crime. Last week, that number was 6.3%. Areas that we've seen in some reduction is in our aggravated assaults and in our shooting violence. Shooting violence year to date stands at a 25% increase. That is 223 additional shooting victims. And what has happened though is that while the shooting violence is still at a pace higher than it was last year per week, the last 4 weeks, we've seen a slight decline from the same 4-week period last year. We're currently analyzing that, and also looking into the month of October, which last year was particularly violent with the number of shooting violence and homicides, to understand if we have any early success in trending and moving this in a more favorable direction. One thing I do want to bring attention to, though, is on auto thefts and property crimes, is that for all Angelenos to draw attention to the importance that as we return to more normal sense, if you will, of our society, is that opportunists are taking advantage of us returning to work, of us being involved in entertainment and dining out and our movements about our communities. And we're seeing some loss in our earlier reductions on burglary, theft in vehicles, as well as other thefts. Particularly alarming, though, is the 8% increase in auto thefts. That is 1,200 additional cars that have been stolen this year versus last. And most alarming is after a decade of reduction, of year after year reduction in auto theft, we now have a 48% increase in auto thefts this year versus 2 years ago. That's 5,613 additional vehicles stolen this year versus 2 years ago. Now, our officers and our investigations have experienced an increase in the number of arrests. Over a 2-year period, our arrests have increased by 30%, which is nearly 700 additional arrests. Currently, we're studying instances in which auto theft, which is typically a zero bail booking process, of how many individuals are being rearrested for new auto theft occasions, and whether or not this bail and court operations, which are deferring arraignments and trials for months in advance, or months towards the future, is somehow facilitating or allowing this increase of these auto thefts. This is auto thefts in the city, as a reminder, began increasing when the pandemic started and has continued since that, month after month, into these numbers. So for Angelenos, the means in which to address this is making sure that your vehicle, valet keys and other keys are removed from the vehicle. So nowhere that if you park your vehicle in a garage, that those keys are not kept in the vehicle or on a hook or location inside the garage, as well as when they leave the vehicle in public parking spaces or in tandem spaces in their residential areas, that they do not leave any key anywhere in the locality. Now, that may appear to be common sense to many, but what we're finding is that people are leaving keys for convenience so that other people can move their vehicles in and out of tandem operations and other types of locations where people are storing their vehicles. Lastly, I want to report on our personnel strength, and there's effectively, we are now at 9,433 sworn members of our organization. That's as of the September 25th payroll period. 2,678 of our civilian personnel are deployed, and 404 reserves, and 1,248 cadets, and that concludes my remarks. And I'll take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioners, questions for the Chief of Police, please.
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Kalanche.
Thank you. Good morning, Chief.
Morning.
Quick question. The 3 incidents you mentioned that turned out to be mental health, suspects with mental health issues, in any of those cases, were we able to deploy our partner van that we have with DMH?
The DMH vans, the 5 psych vans, are not yet deployed.
Not yet deployed. Okay.
Yet deployed.
So if they were, would there be an opportunity to deploy them? Or, because I know that they're geographically kind of spread for specific areas, right?
Yes, and in all 3 instances, though, involving the violent actions of the individual, the role of DMH at that site, that psych tech, or with our smart resources deployed at those locations, is one of a consult, one of offering suggestions. All 3 instances, all 2 of the 2 instances I report on Friday night, both involved our crisis negotiation teams responding to the location, which includes Department of Police psychologists for the purposes of de-escalation, establishing communication, and finding alternatives to have the individual, in one instance, release her son, who she held at knife point, as well as to surrender to the police. And the other instances in which he threatened to kill his parents and set fire to the residence, to find alternatives to having to escalate the situation to force. The last incident, which was this
more of a violent attack, yeah,
was a spontaneous one where he attacked a unfortunately, a student just visiting the LA area, and then officers were confronted with him. And then that instance, the ready access was unlikely to have been there, which is why it's important that our mental health intervention training of our officers continue, so that officers who are many times put in these spontaneous situations have some base, and we continue to reinforce that base of knowledge and experience of the tactics that can prove effective in de-escalating and achieving a successful outcome, which, by the way, the vast majority of times occurs. These are rarities, and given the prominence of mental health episodes that exist every day in Los Angeles.
So in the first two instances, we could have deployed our van,
Well,
if it was available.
The key here is that there is a scarcity of mental health resources in our community in the off hours. That's where this psych van offers a resource that may or may not have been in proximity to this event, but had they been, again, to the incident commander, they would have been a good consult as to an assessment and strategies that could have been employed.
Okay, so there's a need to maybe think about the hours and availability. And I know it's still a pilot, but I think this is just so important that we have this resource available. And then just a quick follow-up on the first two, actually all three incidents. Do we know if there was drug use involved?
I'm not prepared at this point to speak to that.
Okay.
The investigation this is very, very early. I've not had the 72-hour brief yet. I will expect to have that within the next day or so. But what I'm giving you is just briefings that I've counted from the initial event and the couple days afterwards.
Got it. Appreciate it. That's it. Commissioner Decker, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commissioner Soboroff, go ahead.
Good morning, Chief. One is a statement about COVID, and then I'd like to ask you a question about the auto theft. On the COVID during the last week, there's been just an increase in amount of information saying how important vaccination is and how important that masks are. And I just want to, and I'm happy to hear the progress, the deadlines, the way it's being handled. My concern again is a plea to anyone that isn't wearing their mask that works for us, and anyone that hasn't been vaccinated, is to reconsider. Take a hard look at take a look in the mirror and say, why am I not wearing my mask? Why am I not getting a vaccine? And look beyond and reconsider. We all now are knowing kids in kindergarten and grade school and middle schools now that are victims of the deniers, and then the classes shut down for weeks at a time. And so my plea again is to reconsider the ramifications to our children, to our grandchildren, to our neighbors, as far as the mask and the vaccine goes. My question on the auto theft, it's very apparent that the cost of used cars are way up, all kinds of issues. Two questions: what's the recovery rate? And number two is, what's the game here for the bad guys? Chop shops, selling the cars, exporting the cars, joyriding. What's the game? What's the business? And how are we doing? And I can't imagine we have the resources to have a great recovery rate.
So exact questions that we continue to evaluate our data. The vast majority of vehicles that are stolen are being recovered. Sometimes they're recovered in the very neighborhoods in which they're stolen. Other times they're recovered in adjoining areas and outside the city. This was actually a topic of conversation, and Commissioner Bronner, thank you for your continued each week attendance on our crime control meeting. And as we talk about instances and the rates of occurrence, as well as our strategies, we're currently studying the recovery patterns to see if there's been a shift over the last year to 2 years as to whether these vehicles, which have typically been used for transportation purposes only, moved from one place to another, and not for sailing off, exporting or large, criminal enterprises that are replating or reserializing those things. While those things still exist, the vast majority of them we see are maintained they're recovered within 3 to 5 days. But just this morning, we have a fatal accident that occurred in the Devonshire area of I believe she's a 68-year-old woman who was a driver, and her vehicle was struck by a Land Rover containing individuals that ran a red light. Terrible accident causing her death and injuries of others. And that Land Rover was stolen 2 days ago from Glendale. And we are currently, there appears that one of the suspects may have been injured. That's an active investigation. So these thefts are not just mere, joyriding in the sense of a term used maybe in folklore 3 or 4 years ago of kids just, taking an opportunity to move about. Many times they're involved in other crimes, and many times they result in violence and impact of life in our communities because of the recklessness of the individuals involved. Our process moving forward is that to ensure that we do work with our TRAP, which is a regional effort to look at organized car thefts for those that do export, that do part those vehicles out because of the cost of auto repairs. So there are vehicles, that are selected because of their vehicle parts that they represent in the value. And we go after those organized car theft rings. But we also look to the narcotic offender, to the individual who is using that value of that vehicle for some type of street to garner narcotics, because that vehicle can then has a market value on the street for others to use it for more nefarious purposes. That entire continuum is being used. What I wanted to draw attention to today is the criticality is that people need to prevent this crime from occurring and can. Many of these vehicles are not in the traditional way stolen by people breaking into the steering column. While there's some of that, some of these vehicles are made 20 years ago and are, little more than a will is needed in order to take the vehicle. I mean, the keys and so forth are of little security, but vast majority of, significant amount are taken within the last 10 years and have fobs and other more sophisticated systems. And so what we find is that many times there's access to those keys, and that if we can prevent that by the owners and by the operators, that I think that can have a deterring effect. Again, we may have been lulled into a sense of safety with increased auto security systems and year after year declines in auto theft. And I want to bring attention that has shifted significantly with this 48% increase on a 2-year basis, and steadily since the beginning of this beginning and midst of this pandemic. And we need the public's help in prevention, while at the same time we need to look at our court system. We need to look at what preventive measures and deterrent value it can have relative to the instances. We do have, and I'll close, a standing instruction that individuals who are rearrested on auto theft or who are arrested on a previous charge and released on a zero bail, is that they're arrested on a new charge and that's subject to a zero bail, is that we work with the courts for an enhancement, because I believe that these individuals pose a real danger and risk to public safety, as demonstrated by their repeated arrests.
Good, thank you very much. Interesting.
Have you concluded, Commissioner Soboroff? Yes, okay. Commissioner Bonner, any questions for the chief today? No, thank you. Chief, just one follow-up. You mentioned you're doing, if I understood correctly, an analysis to last October. Could you just explain that a little bit more, that last October the rates were high? I just want to put that in better context.
Let me get my stats. So last October, we saw in the week ending 10/9, we had 46 victims shot. The week ending 10/16, we had 39 victims shot. And the week after that, we had 37 victims shot. Those are significant numbers higher than what we saw, than what we'd seen previously to that. So this was a surge in violence, street violence. Our analysis right now is in this last 4 weeks, we've seen 37 homicides versus 36 last year. However, what we have seen is 115 shooting victims versus 137 in the last 4 weeks of last year. So our opportunity here is to understand this 15% reduction this last 4 weeks compared to last year's 4 weeks. That's 22 fewer shooting victims. Where were those reductions experienced? And in the increase in violence that we saw in October of last year, where were those occurring in relationship to the current crime pattern and trend, so that we can anticipate and try to counter. We do know there are some neighborhood dynamics going on during September and October, where neighborhoods and groups will celebrate or come together and have gatherings that have, particularly in South Los Angeles, which have been centers for violence, have been either attractors where they have been subject to people walking up or driving by and committing shooting violence, or shooting violence has occurred within the groups themselves. I want to particularly thank South Bureau Deputy Chief Scott. I want to thank Clint Domind, the captain at Southeast, and Deputy Chief Maude Tangarides and Captain Brent McGuire for their efforts in Southeast area this past weekend, and working with our communities, our grid providers, our contractors that are gang interventionists and ambassadors, as well as with our faith leaders to counter this phenomenon, if you will, of these gatherings not being hotbeds for further violence. And that work will continue in the days and weeks ahead. You may have noticed in some of our social media posts that those efforts were not just enforcement efforts. They were also outreach and engagement with our communities, because we believe that we need to work in a supportive means to counter this. I won't call it a custom, but this practice that we see each year of these gatherings alongside the timing of the calendar.
Understood. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that explanation. We will now move on to item 2 on the agenda, public comment. Madam Secretary, can you please open the public comment period?
Okay, our first speaker is caller ending 3146, followed by Christian.
I guess that works. Hi.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Public input, chief meeting, and Kevin Carr from last week, the action plan 2 from last week.
Okay, 3 minutes.
And I'm not trying to be first. Anyways, wanted to say I hope the people that are swatting Black Lives Matter are brought to justice, because that's crap. This is absolutely disgusting to hear that story. What a mean, hateful person to do that to Black Lives Matter. I'm just so disgusted by hearing that story. So we got on the page 42, there was training. Right now, I think they're moving the age for police to be 21 years old. And I've examined that to be president, you have to be age 35. And the front lobes of the brain are not mature until age 35. That's what needs to happen. The LAPD could do that. Page 62, getting or curtailing officers' social media. You're going to curtail their media, but I think that makes it impossible to identify a bad apple officer, right? So if they can do media and they post bad stuff on there, well, then you can identify them. So I think that's kind of something you should look at. Social media, curtailing them, that's also their First Amendment rights. So 64, a criminal investigation not related to the stop. That's been going on, Black Lives Matter, and people have been talking about that forever. So the mental officer health and well-being, I've always wanted to say some things about this I don't get to say, as I sound like I want to chop them up. I mean, this is doing great things. The LA could be a lot worse today than it is. Without these police officers, this place is going down. The only thing holding this place up is the LAPD. Okay, 82, mass arrest for everyone arrested. When you're doing these things with these protests, I think it's hard to stomach, but I did see an officer got hit in the eyeball. They were shooting fireworks at them. That's explosives. That's on the level of terrorism. 97, a public mobile cell phone. Well, to do that, you got to track everybody. So I just wanted to say some things that I couldn't even finish about. There's no justice in several cases like Rosario Mack, Eric Rivera, and Daniel Hernandez. And there's a new review board coming. And those should be placed in that new review board because they were found to be out of policy. And let's see what the result would be. So, and on this aftermath, they should teach all this stuff into kindergarten, into 10th grade. So people understand really how to address the police department. I think that's one of the things that's destroying everything is they don't really know how to give report to the police department, and it results in people dying. So.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Christian, followed by Matios Cadane.
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
If 18% of LAPD doesn't want to take the vaccine, that equals about 1,800 officers. Can you imagine the rise in crime with 1,800 less officers out there? Shootings and homicides are already up. If I am being murdered or raped or an intruder is in my house, I don't care if the officer is vaccinated or not. I'm not going to stop them and say, let me see your vaccine card. What's the next step? Officers are not going to help victims if they don't have their vaccine passport. Did you know that Los Angeles City Council is voting tomorrow to exclude those people from entering a police station? It's not just excluding these citizens from restaurants, theaters, and malls. When asked by a council member to the city attorneys, they answered the mandate includes police stations since they are city buildings. This is coercion, this is segregation, and this is discrimination. Do rape victims who don't have the COVID shot have to be interviewed outside the police station on the noisy sidewalk with no privacy? Criminals will be emboldened and victims will be shunned, and you will be responsible for this. The government should not dictate what we do to our bodies. We demand medical autonomy, not only for ourselves, but also for the officers we desperately need. Many of us do not trust this vaccine and what's in it. Many people are sick, injured, developing blood clots, and dying from this forced vaccine. Chief Moore, this is a test and you are failing. You are being groomed for the next government mandate, which, as you know, will eventually be the mark of the beast. Without it, we cannot buy or sell anything. It will be on our forehead or on our hand. City Council wants us to hold it in our hand to enter a police station. Your officers won't be able to buy anything if you fire them or withhold pay, since they won't have income anymore. This might not be the actual mark of the beast, but it sure is grooming you and the entire society to comply, or else we are excluded from society. And Commissioner Briggs, I hope you listen to those recordings since you're not here today. We were hopeful when you came onto the board, but now you have showed your true colors, that you'll throw these good men and women under the bus, demonize them, and falsely accuse them of not upholding their oath to protect and serve, just to suit your personal belief and agenda. You have lost our respect, and now there's no trustworthy person on this board to stand up for what's right or for common sense. You have transitioned from taking a knee with BLM to taking a knee to Satan. Please repent and turn to God. That is the only way our city will be protected. There's evil out there, and it's not the people who choose not to take this newly developed controversial vaccine. Keep your eyes focused. Defend, not defund LAPD. God bless and protect them and all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Matios Cadane, followed by caller ending 4952.
Yes, hi.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
It's Montios with Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. First off, on the chief's report, the LAPD just shows time and time again that they shouldn't be handling mental health crises of any sort. I'm so glad that nobody was murdered this time around, but this does not warrant praise from the LAPD. It was still poorly handled. We still need entities other than them to handle mental health cases because we know time and time again that they often murder the people who need the most help. On item 4A, the adjustment to the budget of the 2018 grant for policing innovation, This project was part of the whole data-driven policing that was launched in 2011 for JSS. And this is the same group with Craig Uchida, who were the main architects of the now dismantled LAPD laser program, which was dismantled in 2019. In this program stands for Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration, and it likens community members to tumors that need to be extracted. And that's so telling when you consider the fact that, JSS researched the South Bureau and only South Bureau for its data analysis. And if you think about what the community members look like there, that tells you exactly who the LAPD wants to extract and, get rid of. And the laser program, by the way, has led to just straight up murder. The murder of Grishario Mack at the Crenshaw Mall, that was a laser zone. Jesse Romero, Keith Bursey, and so many others. And also, what I do want to bring up the fact that this commission has not mentioned once that Dr. Melina Abdullah, arguably the LAPD's most vocal and visible critic, has been swatted by the LAPD 3 times now in total, twice in 1 week. This happened most recently after she announced a lawsuit against the LAPD for the initial swatting. I think it's obvious to everyone except for this police commission that this police force is retaliating against a Black woman and her children by targeting their home. And you guys don't seem to care at all, which shouldn't be surprising at this point, I suppose. Stop limiting public comment to 45 minutes. Start holding police officers accountable for not wearing masks and not getting vaccinated. And let us speak on agenda items after they're discussed. This is a ridiculous format. We still don't know the names of the officers who were attacked on January 6th, or I'm sorry, who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. And yeah, defund the police. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 4952, followed by Q Jean-Marie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Hi, I'm going to speak on all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Hi, okay, this is T. Guerra. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition and LAPC Fails Coalition, and I wanted to talk about an item on the agenda today, 4A. This is the 2018 Policing Innovation Grant, and the last time this was on the agenda was in April when Craig Uchida, who is the head of JSS, that's Justice and Security Strategies, came on this Zoom and talked about what this money is for and how benign it is and how it is all about data analysis and really about helping police decide where to focus their resources. But of course, it's not actually about that. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what it is about. So with this grant, LAPD is working with JSS, Justice and Security Strategies, and the FBI to get all of LAPD's data that is related to homicide, and only that data, as the previous caller stated, that is from neighborhoods policed by South Bureau, only that information. So they're getting all of that into a database for analysis, and JSS is the one that is going to be running that analysis and looking for patterns and telling LAPD where they should be focusing their resources. And if all of this sounds familiar, it's because it is. This is the same justification that has been used in the past, this premise of data analysis and data collection and data sharing for the purpose of reducing crime, focusing police resources. This premise has been used to justify police surveillance and an investment in police repeatedly over the last few decades. And it helps for us to understand more about who Craig Uchida is. So this is a person who has worked closely with LAPD for decades, and prior to that was an executive with the Department of Justice, where he and his staff helped funnel over $4.3 billion to police in the form of grant money, such as he is getting today. So let's be clear about that. Uchida was also the person who from 2009 to 2018 worked extremely closely with LAPD to expand surveillance in neighborhoods, primarily Black neighborhoods, and to justify and legitimize the use of body-worn video on cops, and to justify surveillance practices like setting up license plate readers around certain homes or around certain streets in Black neighborhoods. so they could be documenting people's movements more closely and gathering that information. He also endorsed and led the chronic offender bulletin program that went on for years, which was the proactive stalking and harassment of a person. And all of that, again, was based on this idea, this premise that by doing data analysis and looking at that information, it would somehow inform the police of where to focus their resources. But all of that is bullshit, as we know. This program did lead to folks being criminalized. It led to folks being traumatized. It did lead to police murdering people with this premise. And that is something that this board has never acknowledged or investigated. And that program was shut down because not only was it so deeply fucked up by anyone's standards, but it also could not even be shown by you all to result in any decrease in crime. Yet we see now Uchida is still here today working with LAPD on another LAPD policing grant. And all of this is to say.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q Jean-Marie, followed by T.
Yes, I would like to speak to all the items, including general public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes. In the book of James, it said both fresh water and salt water can't flow from the same spring. It says, my sisters and brothers, can a fig tree bring forth olives or grapevine bring forth figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. You can't say your officers care about public safety when they're still willing to expose members of the public to COVID-19. No one has the right to expose anyone to a deadly virus in order to exercise his or her own personal freedom, right? Why are these mentally ill? Secondly, why are these mentally ill people facing charges? How is that determined? As someone who worked in Skid Row for about 15 years, does even the presence of law enforcement to someone who's having a crisis, just even seeing a police officer, does that trigger the people? Do you guys know that data? Thirdly, don't give me this idea about cars being stolen. Obviously, there's a text in the scripture that says, don't let me tell lies and don't make me too rich or too poor. Give me only enough for food each day. If I have too much, I might deny that I need you, God. But if I'm too poor, I might steal and bring shame to the name of my God. So if these cars are being stolen and even used cars are even more expensive than they were, of course, this makes sense. Poverty breeds crime. Simple factor. Poverty breeds crime. Simple factor. And lastly, how is it that the day after a lawsuit was filed against the LAPD by Dr. Melina Abdullah that her house was swatted again? And 1 week later, at the exact same day, on the exact same day that she announced the lawsuit, and at the exact same time, her house was again swatted. So which means there's someone inside of the LAPD we suspect who understands exactly what's going on, who has all the information and is targeting Melina Abdullah. You can't go around taking pictures with Black kids and at the same time swatting Black neighborhoods because somebody is speaking up. And you're saying you're okay with people expressing themselves. You're okay with people coming in here and saying Black Lives Matter is the problem. You're okay with people coming in here and saying all kinds of things about the Black community. But you're going to swat someone 3 times, right, for actually speaking up against a department that has been known to brutalize the Black community. Mass incarceration is not. We're not imagining these things. We're not imagining Rodney.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have T, followed by Steve Rogers.
Hello?
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
First off, want to honor that we're on indigenous stolen land. It's Turtle Island. Honor all those 650 and 500 years of lives have been stolen by law enforcement and what is known as the inception of slave catching. Y'all are disgrace. Y'all are disgrace. First off, police have no business in mental health. We see time and time again, it ends up tragic. somebody losing their life. Y'all don't know anything about de-escalating. You shot 2-3 people in a week. Y'all are abusing and killing people every week. Somebody's dying on these streets because you don't know how to respond. Stop spending our tax dollars. That's why we say defund, because we need resources in our community. Police do not stop crime, right? Y'all just you escalate it, and our brothers and sisters just get killed out here. As far as Dr. Melina Abdullah, this is absurd. You know, this is absolutely absurd that this sister, time and time again, has stood up for our community members and those stolen by law enforcement, and y'all are targeting her. I mean, this, you know, we've seen this time and time again since the 1960s. This is nothing new. You know, anytime somebody speaks out against this evil, and you can't reform this evil. And that's why we say abolition is key, because how the inceptionist country of stolen land and the enslaved that built the Americas that still have not received reparations. Time and time again, these systems are a failure. This entire system is a failure, right? And that's why we say abolition, because we envision.
Madam Secretary, was T dropped? Can you
Let me try to locate her.
possible, let's bring her back, please.
I don't see her logged on. Oh,
Right.
there she is. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me bring her up.
Yeah, I've been logged on. I don't know what y'all did.
We didn't do anything, but we'll
I
give you
didn't do
an extra
anything
15
either.
Ma'am, we'll give you
It's
an
just
extra 15
suspect. Y'all are
seconds.
suspect. I don't know.
Extra
You
15
know,
seconds.
continue
off the
and
clock.
continued surveillance here going
Okay,
on, but we know what y'all are up to. You just it's just the empire
Start
of
the
evil,
clock, Madam
you know.
Secretary. She's
But
gotten.
we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, and we're gonna keep rising up, and we're gonna keep speaking out against these injustice and this evil. You know, abolition is key. Again, you know, and we're not going to tolerate y'all targeting our communities, and we do keep us safe, because again, police do not keep us safe. Y'all are terrorizing our communities time and time again. And again, we're just going to say abolition is key, and we need those resources absolutely for our communities. We're going to stand with our brothers and sisters, and we're going to keep speaking out, right? Because abolition is key. And we say defund the police again, because we need these resources in our community, because y'all don't stop crime, and you don't know how to de-escalate. Our brothers and sisters that are suffering from mental health out here need care, and jail and being shot and whatnot is not the answer. Defund the police. Chief Moore must go.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Steve Rogers, followed by Richie.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
All three, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Let me start off by saying that last week, Chief Moore was not present for a funeral, and no one seemed to mention or know who that person was. It turned out to be an officer, Frank Partita. I'd like to acknowledge his loss and offer prayers to his family, friends, and colleagues. I think that was a disservice that wasn't done last week. A couple of things have been said that are not true, and this regards crime. The first thing is poverty does not breed crime. Let me say that again. Poverty does not breed crime. And I'll give you an example. New York City. Do you know what the poorest community is in New York City? Think for a moment. Chinatown. Chinatown, New York City is the poorest, economically the poorest community in New York City. That is the 5th precinct in New York City. You know they have one of the lowest crime rates, if not the lowest crime rate in New York City? And you know why? It's because of values. Poor values or lack of values contribute to crime. Poverty does not breed crime. There are places all over the world where crime is not that high and the people are living in poverty. It's because of values. They could be Christian values or Confucian values or Judeo values, but there's some kind of values, traditional values. Next, the presence of police officers does prevent crime. And what happened at Hollywood and Highland is a tragedy, but it's not the first time it's happened there. I highly suggest the police commission look at where footbeats are deployed. A footbeat should be at Hollywood and Highland 24 hours all the time. There are many tourists and people that go to that location, and they need to be and feel safe. That's New York City. Another comparison, go to Times Square, 42nd Street, crossroads of the world. You'll see police officers deployed throughout the area on the corner, a lot of times by themselves. Then there's another police officer down the street. Where are the LAPD deployed? Take a look. It's your responsibility on behalf of the public to take a look at this. There are locations that have high density that need to have police officers all the time, not just by chance a police officer drives by or a sergeant drives by and then the issue is addressed. For the COVID-19 situation or the Wuhan virus, rollcallforfreedom.com. That's the number 4. There's a lot of misinformation presented at this meeting and about the virus in general. People are individuals. They have a constitutional right not to be subjected to an experimental vaccine. It's their life. It's their choice. Your life, your body is your choice. Their life, their body is their choice. They're not endangering the public. They're serving the public.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Richie, followed by Blue.
Hi, yes, all available items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, this is Richie Serjanko from People's City Council. This is LAPD shot multiple people last week, and it's just an indication that LAPD should not be dealing with mental health calls. If you can't de-escalate the situation without shooting someone, and we need to invest in, public health workers that can be deployed to people having mental health crisis, because obviously it's not. Well, in what world does a mental health crisis mean that you should get shot by the cops? And how many times does that have to happen? LAPD shooting people. And of course, LAPD is going to show up and shoot people. That's the culture that they have. Chief Moore has shot 2 people himself. He's killed 1 person. That's the kind of culture that is going on at LAPD. And for this commission here, I think it is very important that you see what LAPD is doing to a few of their biggest critics. One, Dr. Melina Abdullah, who has sued the department over swatting, and the cops have showed up to her house twice, once the day after the lawsuit was filed, and then again last Wednesday. Why is this happening? Honestly, you all sitting on this board, you all are overseeing LAPD, right? How come this keeps happening? Why are they showing up? Chief Moore, honestly, we know what's going on. Your officers don't know who Dr. Molina is. I find that really hard to believe. And then also, if you all were to get a call about someone overdosing on pills, which you said was the reason the first time you showed up, why wouldn't an ambulance be called? Why would armed members of the state show up to someone's house if they were OD'd on pills? This is just another example of what LAPD should not be used for. Also, LAPD is targeting William Good in Hollywood. Again, I mentioned this last week. You all oversee LAPD, right? How come LAPD targeted Hollywood cop watcher William Good? He goes by Film the Police LA on social media. You can go and look at his feed. The officers that he had open complaints on arrested him, and then he was held on $50,000 bail. You all are the police commission, right? Honestly, do an analysis of what people are being held on for bail in Los Angeles right now. This was a targeted retaliatory arrest, probably from Chief Moore himself. Chief Moore probably.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Blue, followed by Baba Keely.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
Just public comment, please.
Okay, 1 minute.
Thank you. First, I want to say 45 minutes is more than enough time to have to listen to the same rhetoric that we listen to every single week. And I also want to mention poverty does not breed bad choices or criminal activity. Personal responsibility and personal choices breed criminal activity. We are all responsible. We know good from bad, wrong for right. So that's just false. And I want to thank the Hollywood officers. We do like them in our streets. We appreciate them being in our streets and keeping us safe. Police officers do not kill. Police officers save lives and help us actually to be safe, and those of us that are in need. Yes, we have a mental health crisis, but let's get realistic here. Those who think that mental health people sometimes are not violent are just delusional, because they are. Case in matter, the situation last week. So thank you to our officers and thank you for all they do.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Baba Keely, followed by Adam.
Yes, I'm Keely with Black Lives Matters LA, and I want to speak on the chief's report in item 4.
Okay, 2 minutes.
First, the chief, what was missing from the chief's report is the second swatting of Dr. Melina Abdullah that many people have talked about, and the continued effort to try to intimidate us. She is a powerful and strong person and will not be intimidated. Y'all should know that from the fact that she's been arrested there twice. And you know who she is. The LAPD knows who she is. This is why nobody trusts the LAPD. And this is why we will continue to demand the defunding of the LA police, and that this is happening under the watch of Chief Moore. And that's why he needs to be fired. And we will not be intimidated. She will not be intimidated. And the fact that you all don't raise any interest or question the PD about this swatting effort is an example of your lack of accountability and responsibility. And so, we will not be stopped. We will not discontinue. And if anything else, we will continue to be much more of, and to continue to confront and challenge this police commission. On item 4, reject that contract. JSS, that is a classic example of why and the breakdowns within the police force. We are not tumors to be precisely taken out. And that's that mentality and attitudes that you all have. Reject that contract. Don't do it. They shouldn't even be considered for a contract, given their history with both the public and the police. So we ask you to reject and demand that you reject that contract and fire Chief Moore and defund the police and end the swatting of Dr. Melina Abdullah.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Adam, followed by LAPD Constitutional.
Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Hey, Becky. Could I do all of them except for 4A2?
Okay, 3 minutes.
Hi, yeah. In your response to Commissioner Calanche, Chief, you mentioned the scarcity of mental health resources. Do you think that maybe, just maybe, that we live in a city that prioritizes criminalization and harm rather than actual community safety, as the city spends $8 million a day on the ever-expanding LAPD at the expense of actual life-saving and life-giving public safety models? Consent agenda item 4 is a perfect example of why consent agenda items are absolute bullshit, and why this commission bears their whole damn ass by trying to shove these consent agenda items through with no discussion. This item is in regard to a contract with JSS for $150,000 after continued failures and pathologizing of racialized communities in LA that have bore the brunt of these literal experiments. We saw not only the gross failure of programs like Operation Laser, where Craig Uchida, the longtime LAPD partner at JSS, describes community members as tumors, as folks have mentioned, but we also saw how these experiments lead to actual visceral harm in the community, like the murders of Keith Bursey, Jesse Romero, and Grishario Mack, a father of 2 little girls who should be turning 34 on October 26th. Mr. Soboroff, it doesn't get old listening to you use the word we and us when talking about LAPD employees. That you don't and have never pretended to represent the quote unquote citizen's voice in police affairs, which has been your purported charge for over 8 years, again shows the inherent failure of this commission to be anything more than a rubber stamp to the needs and wants of a police department whose failures your sad pleas continue to point out. As you have spent the last years acting as or being used as a booster for the expansion of the violence inherent to the policing, I do wonder if some of the contradictions of the absolute meatheads making $200,000 a year using guns and violence to perform quote unquote public safety are starting to wear on you. Yeah, it really truly shows the failure of the department when not only does Dr. Abdullah get swatted for a 3rd time, but like other callers have mentioned, the response is guns when it's a supposed drug overdose. How is that ever going to solve or contribute to, someone having a drug overdose needs medical attention. They don't need a bunch of cops running into the neighborhood. So I'll leave it at that, but this police commission should be abolished. You continue to show your true failure as your purported role. And, I hope you lose sleep at night and your kids don't like you. Good day.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have LAPD Constitutional, followed by Zach Sherwin.
Hi.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, so it looks like this commission really needs to be educated on fair, holistic mental health training because vaccine injury induces mental illness and breeds the crime that you guys are dealing with in LA. So big pharma profits off of their death by medicine business model. They love to treat vaccine damage with their mass murder pills and their suicide pills. So people, if you want to blame something, if you want to reform the corrupt system, then you need to look at the vax cult system that is responsible for this manufactured mental health crisis. And also in regards to this commission, how dare you attack unvaccinated and incite violence of hate against us? The unvaccinated are the new Jews of Nazi Germany history repeating itself. So if you want to look at the broken public school system that is filled with sickly, vaccine-injured children with compromised immune systems,
This lady is so out
your
of
ignorance
she needs to be cut off.
to vaccine poisoning and mass harm is shameful. And you need to stop your vax cult bullying. And attention parents, you need to get your kids out of the indoctrination camps because the CDC shielding approach, which is going to medically kidnap your children from parents, is coming. So we need to reach out to all the BLM of LA because Nazi eugenics is alive in California. So stop helping your oppressor that's depopulating you with the vaccine poisoning and murdering people with their incentivized COVID protocol. And as far as the officers go and the October 19th deadline that is fast approaching, they will be invoking their religious liberty against this experimental antichrist injection. They are not asking, they are telling officers who have their God-given natural immunity will not be signing from the request for religious exemption form and religious accommodation certification form that completely violates the equal employment opportunity policy and federal and state laws, including rights to privacy and informed consent. They've had enough of the threats. They've had enough of the coercion that is happening. The coercive methods that are humiliation.
I've been in consultation with the city attorney regarding a number of statements made by speakers, and they certainly are allowed the opportunity to express their opinion. However, when they go off topic, I can cut them off, as that caller did. Have been a number of callers who have expressed a lot of misinformation about vaccines. And the only thing I would say is I encourage everyone to consult with medical professionals who have scientific data to share about vaccines, and not listen to a lot of the misinformation that is being spread both during public comment and elsewhere. With that, Madam Secretary, proceed to the next speaker, please.
Okay, the next speaker is Zach Sherwin, followed by Manar Jarban.
I am going to go ahead and speak to everything.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm wide awake. Oof. I just want to point out, to start with the chief's report, that we spent full minutes of this meeting hearing Chief Moore verbalize, to use his synonym for talking, about auto theft. And meanwhile, there's no mention of so many more pressing issues that the chief could have reported on, or commissioners that you could have used your status as commissioners to ask him about. To list just one from the vast menu of potential topics, still no mention of the fireworks debacle, for which the chief needs to be held accountable. The man is so fireable. Commissioners, you're leaving it on the table. To move to consent item 4A. Yeah, I just want to echo the other speakers who have spoken in opposition to this JSS contract. Craig Uchida is a problem. JSS is a problem. The harm redounds to people like Grishario Mack and Jesse Romero and Keith Bursey. And if this commission has a shred of moral of backbone, then you'll reject this item, and therefore I'm expecting to see it passed perfunctorily. Consent agenda item 4C. If Chief Moore is going to be out of town on Tuesday, October 19th, I look forward to seeing some surrogate in his place to give some kind of chief's report, as opposed to last week when he wasn't here and nobody else was here in his place, whatever the reason may have been, which, by the way, we didn't hear about until people spoke up about it. So the fuck. General public comment. I also want to condemn the LAPD for swatting Dr. Melina Abdullah ×3. This department's harassment of a prominent critic of their off the rails behavior is disgusting, but at this point, it's kind of unsurprising for people who've never physically attended this meeting, especially the pro-cop plants. It's worth saying that in the actual meeting room, the LAPD motto, "to protect and to serve," is written on the wall in quotes, like the air quotes that you make with your fingers when you're saying something that you don't really mean. And I'm always struck by how apt that is. About the 45-minute time limit and forcing us to speak on agenda items before we hear them discussed, commissioners, I just want to ask you to look in the mirror and reconsider. Just take a good, hard look in the mirror and consider the ramifications to our children, our grandchildren, to our neighbors. I'm also curious to hear the commissioners speak on whether the mark of the beast was Mark Smith's nickname in high school. And with that, I'm off to the rest of my day, which will be brightened by Steve Soberoff angrily demanding that the last caller be cut off and nobody even acknowledging that he'd said anything. Fire Chief Moore, defund the cops. Commissioners, I hope you realize what a dismal job you do at what you're here to do. And with that, I will go ahead and yield the rest of my time to the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Manar Jarban, followed by Alex S.
Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
This is Manar from the LMLA. First of all, shame on you, commissioners, for sitting here week after week, listening to Moore's lies, and all the unreversible damages and traumas his failed leadership has cost our communities, and not taking any action to hold him accountable. Moore needs to be fired. Moore enables his officers to put our lives at risk. LAPD had priority access to vaccinations, yet the vaccination rate remains lower than the rate of the general public. They refuse to wear their masks. LAPD interacts with thousands of folks every day, including daily interactions with our unhoused neighbors, our most vulnerable members of our communities. how many COVID deaths are on the hands of your officers more? And when are you going to start taking this pandemic seriously? Moore allows his officers to openly intimidate and harass anyone who tries to hold the LAPD accountable. Dr. Melina Abdullah from Black Lives Matter Los Angeles had LAPD SWAT her home twice in 1 week. Right after she filed a lawsuit against LAPD for swatting her home last summer. This is clearly an intimidation tactic to try to stop anyone from trying to hold LAPD accountable and shine a light on how corrupt this institution is. This is another reason why more needs to go. LAPD clearly shouldn't be handling folks who are experiencing mental health crises. They don't know how to de-escalate, defund and disarm LAPD and fund mental health services. LAPD spends $8 million every single day. Just imagine how much that money and how much of an impact that money can have on our communities. If that money was put into resources and services that can help our communities thrive. Our communities are struggling right now. We are in a global pandemic, and yet our city continues to fund LAPD and neglects our people that are in need of these resources and actual services that help them thrive. Rejected JSS contract, LAPD is not a testing ground for racialized profiling programs. These programs haven't been proven to work, and Los Angeles shouldn't be the ground to test those programs. Defund LAPD, disarm LAPD. I yield the rest of my time.
Madam Secretary, our next speaker will be our last speaker. Thank you.
Okay, Alex S.
Good morning. Oh, hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Good morning. First off, to the new president, William Briggs. I'm disappointed that he's not present today because his recent interviews about the commission were one of the reasons I wanted to give public comment today. But prior to attending my first police commission meeting in 2017, my understanding was that the police commission served as a check on law enforcement in order to ensure public safety. This month marks 4 years of attendance for me, and it was apparent early on that this commission serves to uphold the moneyed interest of our city and not the safety of its people. So to Commissioner Briggs, if you take your position in our community seriously, I beg you to listen to the public comment and give that great weight. What I've seen firsthand in our community for the last 4 years has dramatically shifted my worldview on how harmful LAPD is. Secondly, and most important, I want to address the repeated swatting of community leader Dr. Melina Abdullah's family home. Regardless of how Chief Moore justifies this, one of the following is true. Either LAPD is terrorizing a community leader for openly opposing LAPD's harmful and fatal behavior, or LAPD, who gets $8 million per day, as Adam mentioned, of our taxpayer money, is not competent enough to identify these false swatting calls against a noted community leader. So either incompetence or terrorism are your options. And what I hear week after week is the failings of law enforcement. And I tell Commissioner Briggs that terrorism, based on my experience, is the more likely reason and should be taken incredibly seriously. We hear time and again about community-based policing, how important it is for the public to trust law enforcement. And while you're all saying that to us, you allow intentional harm to be caused using our own tax dollars. I stand with Dr. Abdullah, and I tell you with certainty that defunding the police is necessary for our community's well-being, and that this commission should be ashamed of what it rubber stamps and allows. You permit harm and approve state-sanctioned violence. I yield my time.
That concludes public comment for today. We'll move on our agenda to item 3. Item 3 is a determination that due to COVID-19 state of emergency, meeting in person would present imminent threats to the health or safety of attendees and board action pursuant to Government Code Section 53953, subsection E, subsection 1. Members of the commission, the Board of Police Commissioners, as you know, is deeply committed to preserving public access and participating in meetings of the board. The board meetings are open and public as required by the Ralph M. Brown Act, so that any member of the public may attend and participate. But due to ongoing COVID-19 state of emergency, the state legislature has amended the Brown Act to allow for continued remote teleconferencing participation in meetings of a legislative body, including this commission. Accordingly, because the COVID-19 state of emergency, originally proclaimed by the governor on November 4th, 2020, remains active, and COVID-19 remains a public health concern in Los Angeles with high levels of community transmission, I move that pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, subsection E, sub 1, the board find that holding its meetings in person would present imminent risks to the health or safety of attendees. I will make that motion and ask, will it be seconded by any member of the board?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. We'll proceed to vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Wait, got a question. My question is maybe a little more insight. Is it one, is this something that's going to be acted on every week? And then also, how is it, what's the thought about how we are as individual commissioners to make that determination? Is it based on information that we may come upon individually? Is it based on deferring to a standing order or finding made by the city? Or what is the thought about, how we should really make this determination?
I'll defer to the city attorney on the legal issues.
Good morning. So the amendments that were passed by the legislature last month allows as the Commissioner Decker said, allows the bodies such as yours to continue remotely in your meetings. That is a finding that would have to occur every month. So it will be more or less 30-day increments. As to your question about what findings you make, the findings are those that are available just generally, publicly, comments that have been made by the city council, the commission's ability to hold in public meetings based on ongoing public safety concerns that have been expressed by the county health officer, things of that nature. So what this does is it allows you to continue meeting remotely for the time being. It's my understanding that all city bodies will be doing the same thing if they have not done so already. And that will be something that will obviously be evaluated as things go forward.
I appreciate that. I think maybe a request, I don't know if this is to the executive director or the city attorney or someone, that would be to explore a way that we would have at least some factual basis upon which to make that determination every week. So, I can kind of read the tea leaves from the broad, observation reading and listening to the news daily and so on, but I'm not as on a day-to-day basis as familiar with what executive order or executive directive at the city level or what have you may be in place and what it may be based on. So it's just a matter of not wanting to be in a position of just routinely making this determination really without any factual basis other than the fact that it's on the agenda. So I'm prepared to vote for that today based on the conversation I heard and the chief's report and the other information that's been provided. But I'm not prepared to going forward just to make the determination every 30 days, absent any factual information that might be provided. So that's just the request that someone give some consideration as to what 3 or 4, factual piece of information might be offered up to us in advance of this being on the agenda, so that we really have something factual to rely upon.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. I personally have done fairly significant research before today to assure myself of what's going on in the county and in the city so that I feel comfortable proceeding. Does any other commissioner have any questions, comments, thoughts, or you're ready to proceed to a vote? Okay, I see we're ready to proceed to a vote. I'll call the question. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Very well, it passes 4-0. Thank you very much. I'll move on to the consent agenda. And members of the commission, I am going to take item 4A off the consent agenda. But I'll tell you, the reason is that I will be recusing myself more in an abundance of caution because I do teach at UCLA Law School. And while there doesn't appear to be an actual conflict, it's more for the appearance of impropriety. So I will move item 4A to the end of the regular agenda so that I can step out of the meeting at that time. And I have asked former president of the board, Commissioner Soboroff, to chair it at that point. So with that, the consent agenda item are the consent agenda items remain 4B and 4C. Does any member of the commission, are we ready to proceed to vote, or does any member of the commission wish to hold any items for questions? 4B or 4C? Seeing no questions, I will move items 4B and 4C to a vote and move those forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. On items 4B and 4C. 4A will be heard again at the end of the regular agenda. Moving then to the regular agenda, the first item, item 5B, is the department's verbal presentation discussion by Holmbeck CPAB. Madam Secretary, could you please bring the representatives forward? Captain Huerto, I believe, or excuse me, Jurado, and his co-chair on the CPAB.
Commissioner, that's 5A, not 5B.
My apologies. Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff.
Okay.
Item 5A, the presentation by Holmbeck. Thank you very much. I see the captain and his co-chair are present. Captain, welcome to the commission meeting. We look forward to hearing your presentation.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? I'm just doing
Yes,
a check.
yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. My name is Captain Herman Hurtado, and I'm the acting commanding officer for Holmbeck area. Holmbeck has 15.2 square miles, mostly Hispanic Latino, 200,000 Hispanic Latino community members, but we have all walks of life here. Holmbeck has 7 basic cars, and we serve 4 basic communities. And to my left is a co-chair, Mr. Mark Overstreet, and he'll introduce himself.
Thank you very much for allowing us the time to meet with you. I'm Mark Miss Overstreet, and I've been a CPAB member here at Holmbeck for 15 years. I live with my family in the Holmbeck police area. I'm a school teacher and a school counselor in the Holmbeck police area. And I'm happy to say that one of my students is an officer here at the Holmbeck station. And I was able to get a number of my students into the cadet program here. Several of the Holmbeck officers were DARE officers in my classrooms, working with my students. And it's an honor and a pleasure to work with these officers here at the station. Thank you.
You want to go ahead and start?
So the CPAB of Holmbeck has 6 board members currently, including the Holmbeck commanding officer. Currently, we're recruiting new members. That's an ongoing process. We currently have 1 subcommittee, and that's our Neighborhood Watch subcommittee. The Community Police Advisory Board of Holmbeck has continued to be actively engaged within the Holmbeck community during the past 18 months during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CPAB of Holmbeck has held meetings every 3rd Wednesday of the month at 6 p.m. Meetings during the COVID period have been on Zoom due to the pandemic. Members have informed community members via social media, the local newspaper, and personal emailing list about the CPAB meetings. Summaries of the CPAB meetings, crime statistic updates, and information regarding the LAPD have been posted on social media for our residents. The same information has been published in the local newspaper, which is bi-monthly. Go ahead.
Okay. The CPAP members have continued, we provide our residents and our communities with valuable information from LAPD, provided information regarding the quality of life and obviously the crime. Our CPAP members, along with the LAPD, implemented a neighborhood watch. We train our residents, our officers and our residents. Obviously, we have that shared responsibility of safety. Our CPAP members also volunteer their time, so we're really grateful for the time that they give us. Mr. Overstreet gives a lot of hours every single week and helps us out, not only present, but do different brochures and information, the dissemination within our communities. And he also rewrote the CPAP bylaws to comply with Chief Moore's master CPAP bylaws. We had our Holmbeck had a different ones at one time. I want to share some of the great work that our community members do as a part of our community. And one of them was a salute to our officers we had last month. The Chief of Police was here, but they came out and they helped out, and we just had a great day where they came out and helped out the officers and just showed congratulatory efforts to all the hard work. Our CPAP members also come in. They help us decorate the station. To the right is the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos type of decoration that our community did for the officers. The officers are able to put pictures of the deceased family there to celebrate the Day of the Dead, which is coming out November 2nd. And this is all things that our CPAP and our community members do. This is what our community does for our officers. CPAP, we also had a booth at the El Sereno Fair. And to the left is a neighborhood watch training that Mr. Overstreet does.
Well, it's not just myself, but it's a number of the CPAB members. We've been doing it for years. We feel that the neighborhood watch program is vital to our communities, that we residents become the eyes and the ears of the police. We don't want a police officer on every corner, but we train residents to be vigilant and know who to call, know who to go to for help. It could even be the city council offices oftentimes. And with our CPAP booth, we've had 7 of them in the last year and a half throughout the community.
Could you see the PowerPoint right now?
No, I was going to ask when you mentioned to the left, as to what we'd be looking at. So,
oh, I'm sorry. How about now? No.
Now it is up. Commissioners, can you just give me a nod if you can see it? I just want to be sure. Yes, looks like everyone can see it now. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm very sorry about that. So I wanted to, let me see. I hit share screen and I thought it was showing, so. Okay, so I'll be back to the left is community that helped us out with the Christmas. If you could see that, can you see that? Thank you, Day of the Dead decorations that the community members did for our officers. And then to the left, we have the community members with our neighborhood watch training. And in this neighborhood training, it's very important to know also that with our neighborhood watch, they actually have the phone numbers that the city had provided our officers, so they can have direct communication with the officers when they see something or things that they want to report. It's not just calling communications, but it has direct calling officers directly. Also moving into the National Night Out, CPAP community members, we had a great showing, actually flooded out into the streets. And we had a peace march that day. It was all brought through our police commission. And as you can see also in our courtyard, we had a great presentation where we gave out flyers, community events, and just information throughout our communities. We also have they also help us out with community awareness forums. We have them both in English and in Spanish. And we also give out information at every single one where we put out these kind of wipe out graffiti campaigns, but we also give out brochures on how to stop crime. And we often have these pop-up crime trend community meetings. Our CPAP and in conjunction or teamwork with I
Police
think it was,
Business Association.
I'm sorry, thank you. Police Business Association. We also had CTD helped us out, and our garage. We had a really great day where there was community youth training, where we helped, where we showed the youth how to maintain vehicles, safe driving by CTD. That was a great response. We also had different stations here within our station, where the mechanics actually showed the teens how to do maintenance to the vehicle, change tires, change the oil. And that's one of the stations that you could see there. And also how to do pre-inspections of the vehicles. And that was offered through all our communities. And we had a really great response from a lot of schools. They sent students that were about to get their licenses or actually in the process of getting their license.
One of the things about CPAB is not only do we meet with the captains and the senior lead officers and give them information from the community about issues, we take that information that we get from the captain and the officers back to the community. And we work with so many different within so many aspects of the community. Another one is LAUSD has a safe passage meeting each month where the captain and myself or other CPAB members meet with the principals of the local schools in the East Side area and discuss their concerns and then provide them information coming from the police department. Doing a lot with the schools and with the youth.
Yeah. Also, just moving on into our shared responsibility and the community input that's so important for us here at Holmbeck. Some of the interactions with our clergy members, the schools, we had a backpack giveaway at a local school from Victory Outreach. And this is also things that are input from our CPAP members that tell us where they think that we would get more beneficial from having our meetings or having different community interactions. We also had here, with the help of CPAP, the community blood drive and the Red Cross of America, where we had officers that gave blood. There's somebody there. We also have, with our input, community cleanups, and we try to do them in conjunction with the council districts and to really help us out with the other sister entities. As you can see here, they provide us with all the heavy machinery, and CPAP will tell us where they believe that we'll get the most benefit of cleaning up. CPAP's always at our coffee with the cops and our field roll calls. Again, we go out into our communities and show that shared responsibility. Different coffee shops, and always we have the information dissemination, and we just give out different information of other city resources that our community can use. This last Friday we had the Steve Gaida Youth Awards, where 8 youth received scholarship awards. These were kids from the Boys and Girls Club. We have one of our own cadets. We have kids from GRID and from different organizations within Holmbeck, and they all received a scholarship for their leadership within their own little communities. And some of our shared responsibilities are community action plan. We have a great relationship with CSPB in Ramona Gardens, and we still have our officers go out there and they partner with CSP. Also, we have our great partners in GRID, and with that Legacy, you can see Legacy LA and Ramona Gardens helped us out tremendously. Ramona Gardens is pretty much crime-free with their partnership. Plus, we also do business visits. On the right, you can see we just took a picture, but we want the officers to go inside the businesses and actually meet the managers and the employees, exchange business cards and information, not just to walk by. We have our POW program. Obviously, right now we have Get It Straight in the diversion program. We have approximately between 40 and 50. Our Lights, Camera, Action Leadership Media program, it starts next week when we have about 24 students And this is a really great program where the kids are given a camera, they go out and film their lives, they film themselves, they film the family, then they're taught how to put it into a short film. This way they can express actually their feelings and the things that they kind of go through within our community. And this is done through the schools in partnership with our council districts. And this is just a really great program for the kids. Our soccer program is going to come out. It's going to start taking registrations. We usually get about 150 interested. We have the PAL Up, which starts on Friday. We have 30 students registered, and we have our 30 cadets and 8 recruits. Here at the station, we have 15 volunteers in various capacities. But some of our future plans that we have with our CPAP is obviously getting more qualified members, and we want at least one member from each community here in Holmbeck, Lincoln Heights, Boyle Heights, El Sereno, University Hills, Montecito Heights, and we want to start also moving to in-person meetings.
Yeah, I'm impressed. When I first started on CPAB, working with the officers, all of the things that are going on at this police station, going on in the community with our police officers. One of the things I didn't mention was that the officers, along with some of the CPAB members, we go to the schools, go into the classrooms, make presentations to the students about becoming a police officer and what the duties are of a police officer. Doing a lot of outreach with our youth to get them to see the police as their friends, not their enemies. And I'll end my part of it by saying that the residents of the East Side community, we support our police officers with a small exception of people that don't. But our senior lead officers, our captains here in Holmbeck, they work hard continuously to create a positive image and to keep us safe. And it wasn't always like that. I remember 40 years ago, 50 years ago during the Chicano moratorium, the police were seen as an invading force, and there was a lot of animosity. Not so much, not at all. You talk to residents within the East Side community, they'll say, yeah, we love our police officers. You know, we want them here, we need them here, and we support them. And it's because of the good job that our police officers have been doing, getting out into the community. Years ago, people would have never seen the police captain. Our captain is here, he's there. Our senior lead officers are ambassadors taking care of specific issues that the residents bring to them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Captain.
Questions for us?
I'm sure there are. Captain Jurado, Mr. Elderstream, thank you so much for your presentation today and for bringing to life all of the various activities that you are collectively working on and the community engagement, very importantly, and particularly with the youth. We really appreciate not just you presenting today, but the work you're doing every day in the community. So thank you to both of you. Commissioners, let me open it up to questions and questions about the program, about their engagement, and just open up your microphones if you have a question. Commissioner Commissioner Calanche, if you don't mind.
Oh, thank you. I just want to thank you for your presentation. I grew up in Holmbeck and still live in Holmbeck Division, so I appreciate the work that you're doing. I would love to see the CPAB grow. I would, love to see more young people as well join the CPAB. And I'm not talking, about teens. I'm talking about like young adults that I think are are moving back into our neighborhoods that we should be engaging. So yeah, I appreciate the work. I see Captain Hurtado everywhere, so I appreciate that he's very engaged in the community. Just thank you for your service.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bonner, I had seen you and Commissioner Calanche were vying for open mic time. I assume you have some questions, sir.
I do. Just a couple of questions, if I might. Thank you very much for the presentation. One question first is, can you just give us a snapshot of the 1, 2, or 3 top issues that seem to be at the top of the CPAB agenda these days, whether that's lifestyle issues or violent crime, whatever it might be. But what are the top couple of issues that the CPAB seems to be focused on?
Well, always had a gang issue, but it's manifested itself even more during the pandemic when they started letting out a lot of the people from jail, and they are coming into the community and recruiting the young people. Homicides are up, and they're pretty much all almost all gang related. The homeless continues to be an issue, and the police department has kept some statistics on homeless perpetrators and homeless being victims of crime. And there is a lot of perpetrators in that homeless population. And the Holmbeck area has one of the largest homeless populations. We're talking about Boyle Heights, El Sereno, and going down to the riverbed area. Those are 2 very big issues.
I appreciate that. By the way, on the first issue you mentioned with the I presume there's probably a early release, or at least a number of people who may have come back into the community from the correction system. Does the CPAB collaborate, say only or exclusively or primarily with the police department, or is that or like on that issue, would CPAB or any of the members also be collaborating with any of the organizations that are that exist in order to facilitate reentry and or at least to stem the tide of the scenario that you described, of members coming out and either themselves not having something productive to do or trying to recruit other members? So do you collaborate with others on that issue, or is it something you talk primarily to the department about?
Well, the CPABs mainly are for quality of life issues, and we do collaborate with community organizations, and we do attend collaboratives that USC puts together, and we do meet with some of the nonprofits that provide therapy or services to the homeless and to the local gang members. We did have a youth from the Homeboys industry get an award at our Youth Leadership Awards last week. And if you know Homeboys, they work with the homeboys, the gangsters.
Indeed. Thank you. I appreciate that. One other question was, you mentioned some of the interplay between the information that's either exchanged, information going to or from the department. Can you, and I usually try to, in these presentations, get somewhat of a very localized feel for the issues and the under discussion in the community, as opposed to what we might see on some of the higher level anecdotes and reports that we receive. So can you give me just 1 or 2 examples of information that the CPAB and members, say, for example, might put forward to share with the department, and maybe 1 or 2 things that information that you've received from the department that you then work to disseminate in the community?
Absolutely. I'll give you a real quick example, but actually coming from the community members and receiving their input, sharing that responsibility. We received some information. Obviously, we do see it at Fourth, for an example, Fourth and Cummings. We've had a really bad problem. We have members that they have actually an association at the park, at Holmbeck Park, and also some community members, also part of our CPAP members, were talking to us about some homeless. So that there comes to us through the meetings. We're there with our senior lead officers, the captains, the OICs of different units. And with the help of the Council District 14, we were able just yesterday to move 23 people into homes that were living in the park and living underneath that freeway at 4th and Cummings, right under the 5 freeway. So right now, if you look at it, I just actually posted it on my social media. So we were able to move 23 out of 27 homeless people into housing. So now the area is going to be clean, and hopefully we'll be able to keep it that. But that's due to that collaboration and that information that comes from our community members, from our CPAP members, from our SLOs, them being walking on footbeats. And then it comes into action when we're here in the office, in our area offices, we're able to use all this information and put it into play. And the results are out there right now. Everything is cleaned, and it looks like people are enjoying the cleanliness. And we also have 23 members of our community that are housed now. So
the same thing in the El Sereno area. Residents informed us over and over again, keeping us abreast of all the homeless that were on a median, and they were taking over the Veterans Memorial area and just harassing people, making a mess. So letting the officers know, the senior lead officers in that area, keeping an eye on things, working with the city council, working with the different city departments. The area is cleaned up now, and residents have told us, wow, thank you very much, that things can get worked out and can get better.
Well, it's important. Even some of the small victories, I think, are important along the way. So appreciate that effort. And I would just lastly want to wish you well. And you mentioned you got a recruiting effort underway. And as Commissioner Calanche asked about, I don't know how any people define youth or young, that crowd these days, but there is at least an interest in trying to figure out, we have a fairly robust set of efforts that are directed toward, people who clearly are youth, under 18, and there's other efforts that you see for people who've been around for quite a while, but in that, 20 something to 40 something demographic, if you will, I think, there's a continuing interest to try to see what we can do to get more of that demographic involved in the conversation around policing one way or the other, whatever the perspectives may be. So I'd encourage you to give that a hard look as you pick up your recruiting efforts.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke.
Thank you. And from Holmbeck and all of our officers, I want to thank the police commission, the chief of police, for giving us the opportunity to share our hard work and to also acknowledge your hard work. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Let me just ask Commissioner Soboroff, did you have anything you wanted to add today?
No, other than I'm really familiar with your work, and thank you very much for what you're doing. And I think that other CPABs follow leaders, and you guys are a leader. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. If I could just pick up on one comment, I believe, Mr. Overstream, that you said with respect to during the pandemic, and you've had meetings on Zoom. I wonder if you could just expand a little bit on during the pandemic, were you able to engage more members of the community because it was remote? And if so, do you feel those individuals will stay for the long term? Any positive information out of the pandemic that we can glean from all of your activities?
Well, no, the number of people that attended the Zoom meetings was much less than when it was in person here at the station. And one of the things we did do before the pandemic is we would have our meetings in various locations throughout the community. So people in El Sereno would feel that they're more part of the CPAB and the police station, because we're here in Boyle Heights and we serve 4 different areas. So we would try to go to the other areas and not always have it right here in the Boyle Heights area. One of the positive things about the Zoom is it made us be more creative and using social media. The local newspaper we must get out to about 40,000 people on various websites with our agenda, with our meeting summaries and other things that are going on with the CPAB and the police department. So that's a positive. And we'll keep that up.
We'll keep the momentum.
Yeah.
And obviously great points of improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a very robust list of individuals from which, who've expressed at least some interest in engagement with what you're doing. So that's at least terrific news, and I appreciate hearing that. I just want to join again my colleagues in thanking you very much for your time and for your great description of all the activities that are going on in Holmbeck. We truly appreciate your time today. But as I said earlier, most importantly, the work you're doing every day, truly amazing. Chief, did you want to just add anything about Holmbeck that before we sign off?
I want to echo this board's appreciation. This is a community that cares deeply about its safety. It has a history with law enforcement that has not always been favorable, and I'm encouraged by the relationships we have established over this past decade of partnerships and collaboration. And as I think Commissioner Bonner, as he asked, for what the topics are and the ground truth of what's going on, this is a CPAB that has that advisory role well identified, and their outreach and engagement is to be encouraged. And as this commission has, I as well, capturing the 20 to 40-year-old market in any sense in today with the busyness of our society is a difficult challenge. We're all hopeful that the Zoom aspect of us learning to capitalize on this tool, in addition to in-person meetings, is perhaps an avenue in which to capture that time, most precious commodity. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Captain. Thank you, Mr. Overstream. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very, very much. And thank Captain for being such a good partner.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Chief.
Thank you all. Madam Secretary, if you could bring up, we'll be turning then to item 5B. And while the board secretary is making an adjustment, colleagues, I just want to apologize a little bit. I'm a little rusty at this job. I do want to follow up, and Mr. Tiefenk ask you to work with the commissioners in developing materials, consistent data for that monthly vote that we had in item 3 today, pursuant to Commissioner Bonner's request. And I'm sure all the commissioners would appreciate just developing consistent data regarding COVID in the city and the county, and generally developing a body, a record upon which the vote can take place. The factors may change month to month, but I know there's an abundance of material out there, but it would be good to establish a record. And I apologize for not following up on that when we were on that matter. As I said, I'm a bit rusty, but thank you all for your indulgence on that. I see the board secretary has brought up transit services for item 5B, the department's verbal presentation discussion relative to the scope of work contained in the contract with the LA County MTA. And I think we're having Commander Graham present. Sir, are you here?
Yes.
And a team of people. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gerald Woodyard. I'm the commanding officer of Transit Services Bureau. And my partner, Donnie Graham, will be giving a presentation and talking about our partnership with the MTA and the operations as a whole. I also have here Sergeant Mike Padilla, who will cover our Hope and Spew unit. Detective Young Moon will talk about our crime picture. Lieutenant Leonard Perez will cover operations, and Sergeant Humberto Najera will cover training if there's any questions with that. At this time, I will pass it over to my partner, Commander Donnie Graham.
Good morning, members of the board. Good morning, Chief, Mr. Inspector General, and City Attorney. It's our pleasure to be here today to give you a verbal presentation about the Transit Services Group and our operations in fulfillment of the contract with the Metropolitan Transit Authority. So just as a quick overview, under the executive leadership of Chief Woodyard at the Bureau, I am the commanding officer of Transit Services Group. I provide staff level support for Transit Services Division, which is the actual operational division providing that contract-based services. So, Transit Services Division is commanded by Captain 3 Armand Carranza, and he is on a well-earned vacation at the moment. So his team is stepping in to give the operations presentation on his behalf. So the history of us, well, we're going to put a PowerPoint presentation up on the board here. And Madam President, do you see the presentation?
No, we see that you're starting to share a screen though, and now it has come up. Yeah,
okay,
we have it now.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Okay, so quick history of Transit Services Bureau. In the LAPD got out of the transit service business in 1990 or 2002. And then in 2015, the discussion began about getting back into a relationship with the MTA to provide policing service within the city of Los Angeles for the MTA. So a project team was assembled on November 25th, and they worked towards the creation of a contract with the MTA in response to their request for proposals. The MTA approved the contract, and our relationship officially resumed with the MTA on February 23rd, 2017. And at that time, they entered into a 5-year contract, which is set to expire in July of next year. Next up. Oh, I'm behind. So at the time that the contract was signed, MTA's policing priorities for the LAPD was to decrease response times to emergencies, priority and routine calls, increase law enforcement security, deter crime and vandalism, reduce vulnerability to terrorism, enforce MTA's code of conduct, and reduce fare evasion. But as an overarching philosophy to all that, having a visible presence of LAPD on the lines, engaging with the public as they take advantage of the public transportation system of the region, has always been the underlying main mission of the MTAs, to provide that visible presence of security on the lines. Some of the priorities that MTA had introduced, the focus on those have changed over time, but the essential mission remains the same. As far as operations, as I said, the Bureau is headed by Chief Woodyard, who also oversees the traffic group. I oversee directly the traffic or transit services, and Transit Services Division takes care of the day-to-day operations. So as we continue to move, next up is this is a very brief look at the organization of the Bureau. And then we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how we report our successes to MTA, what are the metrics that we're governed by, what our deployment strategy and what our operations strategy is. And to talk about that, I'm going to turn it over to our operations lieutenant, Lieutenant Perez.
Greetings, honorable board members, VIPs, Chief Moore, City Attorney's Office, and the IG's office. Thank you very much for joining us. So one of the things that Metro bases our response and activity on is these KPIs. One being the number of foot and vehicle patrols at the bus stops, transit centers, platforms, and any associated property with MTA that's not up there. A hint and point would be like a bus division, a parking lot, or a parking structure that's associated or used by the ridership along the metro system. We give them an update of our staffing levels or any vacant assignments. We provide them a ratio of the proactive versus dispatch radio calls. Bus boardings and trade boardings, we take a look at it on a daily watch of bus boardings by the officers and by the supervisors. One thing I would like to add, going back to the prior contract, is one of the first things we did is we researched how could we do things better as part of the transition team, and we all came up with the idea that we would take the police cars away from the officers and have them work a true footbeat, launching from their satellite roll call locations or Union Station roll call, and spend all their time on the platforms, riding the trains or riding the buses. The supervisors are provided a vehicle, and if there's any issues in regards to response time, we can get assistance from the geographical divisions to help out to stop the clock if, say, one of our supervisors is tied up and can't respond if the officers have a delay with the train or one of the buses. So that was one of the things that the takeaway from the first contract moving into this next evolution of the contract we have now, and it's been a success for us with having the officers work that footbeat and spend all their time either on the trains or the buses. Number 5, incident response time, decreased and increased of crimes, and the number of grade crossing operations. The start of the contract, we did have motor operations with us where they would focus and work on grade crossings to reduce the incidence of train versus vehicle or train versus pedestrian, either through an educational or through enforcement actions. Since the pandemic started, we have lost our motors temporarily, and I know MTA is researching that to bring them back to us because they were very successful for us in helping us reduce that incidence of the Ks and versus the trains and the pedestrians. The biggest takeaway from the next slide here, the deployment strategy, is that we hire the officers on an overtime basis. We do not take anything away from the city in regards to their basic response police services or other police services throughout the city. Hiring these officers does not impact any current deployment resources from the city of Los Angeles. So it's a win-win. It's a force multiplier. You're getting 24 supervisors and 128 supervisors in a 24-hour period in uniform deployed throughout the city on the dime of the MTA. So it's a win-win for both sides. Next. Here's a brief look at the MTA system that covers LA County wide. Obviously, we don't go outside the city of Los Angeles, but that just gives you an idea, a picture of what they cover in regards to their heavy rail and their light rail system, 93 platforms in total. Next. Here's what LAPD is responsible for in regards to the rail system. As recent as 9 months ago, they've changed over from the color code to the letter code. So we're in a transition process of keeping everything the same with the A versus the blue line and so forth. So you see the rail operations there. You see the 2 dedicated bus lines, the silver line and the orange line that runs through the San Fernando Valley. Tying these all together, we work with the Rail Operations Center, who is our master controller of all the rails that are moving throughout the county. So we work in conjunction with them. So our platforms we're responsible for an LAPD is broken down there by line. LAPD is responsible for 58 platforms. That is a lot of area to cover in regards to a 24-hour coverage for the city. Bus service, I mentioned earlier, we are responsible for the silver line and the orange line. Those are dedicated bus lines. That silver line runs along the 110 freeway, exits near downtown, and continues on outside the city limits through the county. And your orange line is a dedicated orange line that starts in North Hollywood and ends out at Chatsworth. Those 2 bus lines were where we have bus riding teams that deploy on those and are responsible for policing those, as well as the supervisors. And if we get our motors back, they will be out there enforcing that grade enforcement regarding those buses. Just a side note regarding the buses, MTA deploys approximately 2,000 buses in a 24-hour period throughout LA County. So that's a lot of area to cover regarding the buses. Here's a breakdown by watches. I don't want to go too much in the weeds, but we do have 3 watches. They're 9-hour watches. The supervisors work 10 hours, so there's an overlap to give them time to handle roll call or respond to a satellite roll call location and provide updated crime trends, strategies, any information that's conveyed through CSOC or MTA through their lessers or CCATs. Basically, their information that is fed to our senior lead officers on a daily basis in regards to any crime trends that are noticed or observed by the MTA employees that they wish for us to look at. So we work in conjunction with them on a daily basis, getting that information out to the officers and the supervisors working the line. Here's a snapshot of your Watch 2 deployment and how the officers are deployed. Watch 2 has 9 and 46. Watch 4, your PM watch, mirrors Watch 2 with the same deployment, 9 and 46. And the only difference is our Watch 3, which is your midnight watch, starting at 2200 to 06, and it's on a smaller scale, and that's because of the crime trends. There's less buses. Rail operations cease anywhere between 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. until about 4 a.m. For cleaning and end-of-line cleaning. So there's no operations there. So morning watch is a smaller contingent of deployment of officers and supervisors on the lines. I mentioned about the bus riding teams. So these are officers that are deployed by bureau, depending on the crime trends. We can redeploy them. We can have them focus on a particular area, say like Pershing Square or 7th and Metro or somewhere out in the valley that is problematic. So you got 10 officers deployed on Watch 2, your day watch. You got 10 officers deployed on Watch 4, your PM watch, and you have 8 officers on your morning watch. They do work in tandem with each other. Like I said, they start off from the roll call location, and they'll either take a rail or a bus to their line and then stay within that line, meet with the drivers, do multiple bus boardings. What I mean by that is instead of riding one bus for an hour long, they can stop at one bus stop and board 5 buses and then move on to the next location. So they appear that they're addressing a lot of issues, whether it's on the bus stop or the bus line itself.
Thank you, Lieutenant Perez. So Detective 3, Young Moon, is the supervising investigator of our investigative section. And so I'm going to turn it over to him to discuss his operations and give you an overview of crime within the life of the contract.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Detective Young Moon, as the commander mentioned. I am the D3 here for the investigative section for Transit Service Division. We're comprised of 1 D2, 2 D1, as well as 2 crime analysts. One of our primary duties here at Transit is not to handle primarily the investigation itself. The responsibility of investigation still goes to the area detectives. Whether it be Holmbeck or Hollywood or whatever area the crime occurs, that area is still responsible for the investigation. However, our team is mainly comprised to be support for all area detectives as well as the specialized investigation units. We provide support in the sense of finding and identifying victims or witnesses that may be MTA related or MTA personnel. Our primary function is to assist with the surveillance videos. On the MTA property, we have the cameras that are located on every rail system, the trains, as well as the platforms at every station. However, at Union Station, there's a little bit of a addition that not only is it the MTA's responsibility, but MTA security has their own camera system, as well as some of the private security, such as Allied Security that mans Union Station. So we work with the different entities to obtain all video surveillance, any kind of evidence that the investigation units will need for their investigation. We help also with the daily as well as weekly and monthly crime analysis. Our CAD unit consists of 2 crime analysts, and their job is to get out all the information for comm staff or crime control meetings, daily meetings that we have with our watch commanders to show areas that are in more need or extra patrol due to the high frequency of crime. Our detectives answer and respond to all the conference calls throughout the bureaus, South Bureau, Central Bureau, and so forth. We assist the detectives with crime alert flyers, as well as conducting interviews or doing field show-up, photographic show-ups, any part of their investigation that they need assistance with, that is our function. organization. We are a little bit different. As you can see, our manpower is limited, but we work throughout the city. Again, anywhere from where the bus lines go, from South End, from Harvard Division, all the way out to the Valley. We talk and communicate with the detectives from not just our agency, but as well as the sheriffs in Long Beach to get information out to assist in any kind of criminal apprehension. Again, also to locate and identify witnesses to help any of the investigations out.
All right, so overseeing all the specialized units within Transit Services Division is Sergeant Mike Padilla. And so I'm gonna turn it over to him and he'll start out talking about HOPE and the continuance of HOPE in MTA.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sergeant Padilla. I'm currently in charge of the HOPE effort here at Transit. And what this team currently consists of is 1 sergeant, 10 officers. For the most part, it is modeled after the prior HOPE team that I was also part of in Valley Bureau. Our main mission is for the officers to go out and engage the homeless throughout the system, whether it be part of rail, bus, or any of MTA's properties, where we become aware of either encampments, any kind of public safety issues, ridership complaints, anything that would interfere with operations. And so the officer's mission is to go out, engage the homeless, conduct evaluations, and look to connect them to services. This particular effort has grown beyond what it was previously, and with the support of DMH and our command staff, I've had a permanent DMH clinician as part of the team that goes out with the officers daily. And I'm on my 3rd school year of having USC interns that are working on their masters in social work, also coming out and conducting proactive engagement, gaining an opportunity to enhance their evaluation skills, learn more about mental health, networking, some of the challenges and barriers for the homeless community. So we go out and based on either known patterns of homeless activity or complaints or concerns about public safety, that's what kind of dictates where the officers will deploy on a daily basis. Even though we're not large enough and don't have the support to be carrying cases, there are oftentimes where there are very complicated situations where just based on broken systems that exist, the officers are very helpful in staying involved, staying proactive, advocating for the individuals or families, and helping them get past a lot of barriers. And just a quick example, and we have plenty, but one example is someone that they're working with right now had been an employee for the city for over 20 years, kind of fell through the cracks, too young to collect on a retirement, didn't have family out here, had a blowout with a roommate, a handful of other things, and just kind of got lost in the system. Was higher functioning, so because of the vulnerability, wasn't a lot of resources weren't accessible to him, and pretty much surrendered like so many others had. So by chance, happened to be on MTA system. The officers have engaged them along with DMH, our partnership with PATH. Our interns also play a large role as they're coming up to speed quickly. And we're currently working on getting this gentleman reunified with family in Ghana, Africa. So it's a very involved process, but because we're open and available to work with any partner, really allows the officers to get a lot done. So we make every effort we can to lead with services, educate the homeless, get them connected to services, improve the public safety, and anything that would interfere with operations, obviously, and ridership safety is a priority. And that, in a nutshell, is what the HOPE team consists of. So moving on to the Special Problems Unit. So currently, our deployment on the Special Problems Unit is 2 sergeants and 10 officers due to a few vacancies. Their main mission is to address either specific crimes of concern or crime trends throughout the system or anything that impacts MTA's interest. They have the ability to go out and deploy multiple strategies. Some include simple, just uniform crime suppression and high visibility. They can also transition into plainclothes operations, whether it be for apprehension or just to monitor activity that's going on in the system. And they can handle anything from vandalism and thefts, all the way up to apprehension of criminals that are wanted for more violent crimes or any other issues that may be out there. We use them pretty much for any and every complaint. They're a very versatile, flexible unit, highly skilled officers, trusted to operate in a plainclothes capacity. They support and work with other agencies or other division partners when we have shared problems. But like one of the things that was described earlier is just the massive size of the system. When you consider all the moving parts from the train cars, stations, moving buses, thousands of bus stops. It's definitely a challenge. It's a lot different than a division that would normally just handle their particular geographic area. And the same challenge exists for the officers as well. It's not just static encampments that they deal with. They deal with a lot of homeless that are using the system as a safe place to stay, but they're on the move. So you may not get a second opportunity or too many opportunities to address either a crime issue or a homeless issue. But they do use a lot of partners.
And before we move on to the senior lead officers, I just wanted to highlight one of the interoperable successes that we've had recently. Starting in the spring, we were tracking a crime trend about some vandalism and theft that was happening to the MTA system itself that could have actually posed a danger to riders. We were kind of at a loss for the suspects. They were hitting up and down the system from as far north as northeast to as far south as southeast division. But through the coordination of our investigators, our special problems unit, and the expertise that was provided to us by Commercial Crimes Division, in about 2 weeks' time, we were able to identify suspects, go up on those suspects, and make some key arrests to end that potential threat to the system. So it is an example of all of the elements that were planned to work together and to work together with our specialized units within the department to bring about a successful end to that investigation. So with that, senior lead officers.
Okay, and then moving on, our senior lead officers. Currently, we're looking to fill a few vacancies, but typically the unit would be 1 sergeant and 5 officers. We have 1 for each geographic bureau, and we have an additional to support our central bureau efforts because of Union Station and all the challenges that go with that location. The senior lead officers work very much like a divisional senior lead officer. They are the liaison between our department and the community. In this case, a large part of the community is MTA related, whether it be ridership, whether it be management, facilities, operations of bus or rail. They partner often with the divisional senior lead officers to address mutual problems that we may have, oftentimes having to do with bus stops and other community complaints. They're very involved in not only the social media and awareness piece, education for both MTA and the ridership, but they handle a variety of events with local schools and businesses to educate them on the services that are available through MTA, and basically just giving them support on how to better understand how to navigate through the system. In addition to that, they work with oftentimes with security to address a lot of the issues that are quality of life or ridership experience issues. So they have both third-party contracted security that MTA has, as well as their own internal security. And so they've become very adept at providing training and direction for those security guards to improve how they conduct their business, how they treat the ridership, how they can better serve MTA. So they cover a lot of ground, both in education, engagement with the community, representing our department, and improving our relationship with MTA and the rest of the community.
All right, so that's fine. So our training unit, which today has been our technical support behind the camera here, but like most other divisions, we maintain a training unit in order to do risk management evaluation and to do training. But What I've asked Sergeant Nahara here to highlight is the training that every officer who comes to MTA must undergo.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us. My name is Humberto Nahara. I'm the training coordinator for professional development here at Transit Services Division. So one of our responsibilities at the training unit, I myself, in conjunction with two other police officer threes that work for me, assistants, we conduct heavy rail safety training along with MTA rail instruction to meet those federal mandates from the Public Utilities Commission in making sure that the officers understand how to navigate this new environment with the environmental hazards, including navigating through the transit systems, subway systems, ancillary areas, tunnels, buses, and some of the hazards, in particular third rail and emergency evacuation procedures in the event of a fire or an unusual occurrence. So right now, currently, we have approximately a little shy of 6,400 personnel trained, and we have 6,300 that are actively trained personnel in MTA. We host heavy rail safety training on a weekly basis to maintain that we have a robust cadre, that we're able to meet the coast deployment as needed. And sometimes when we have enhancements or special events such as football games or demonstrations, what have you, that we're able to push out enough personnel to make them available and eligible to maintain the safety on the system. Additionally, we investigate all the uses of force that occur on the metro system. I'm happy to report that we're down in the uses of force about 28% from the year prior. Currently, we're trending at 64 uses of force, non-categoricals, levels 1 and 2, compared to 2020, where we had 89. And this is obviously post-COVID. However, we do see, we monitor the trends, and such as we identify individuals experiencing homelessness, or individuals identified as mental illness. We compile that data. What seems to be the trend? What is the most challenging area to police and monitor? I share this information to my commanding officer and to the other stakeholders here, and then they make the strategies and development to best serve the system to reduce those fears of incidents and crime, and then making sure that during training and on daily roll calls that we echo and reinforce that our primary objective is to maintain the government's best interest of public safety, that everything that we do has a nexus to crime, that officers have the probable cause of reasonable suspicion, because since everyone here is on an overtime basis, we have different thresholds of expertise. Some work administrative assignments for a very long period of time. Some are barely just off probation and P2s, and sometimes they're combined together to work a footbeat. And in and of itself, it's an inherent challenge. So we make sure that the officers understand the mission, that they get calibrated on the department's expectations, and if they're acting in the best interest of the government and public safety. So I won't bore you with all the other details that we do, but we prior to COVID, we did have a very robust training curriculum that we work with MTA's emergency management, testing the facilities from i.e. a fire or hazardous material or a bomb or a MACTAC situation. We've conducted several training in conjunction with our sister agencies as well, with MTA, with MTA's physical site security, Long Beach Police Department, LA County Sheriffs, and LA County Fire Department and LA County Fire. We look forward to continuing this training once the restrictions have been lifted. But thank you for your time.
So that's a great transition into another responsibility that we have as an organization, which is the assistance to MTA for critical infrastructure protection. As you can see, Union Station and 7th and Metro specifically are areas where we deploy daily footbeats in support of the metropolitan, the MTA security officers. And we also, to assist with that, how the MTA helps to fund a K9 unit of 1 sergeant and 6 dogs and handlers who are specialized in bomb detection. The next slide just shows you an example of what their daily reports are and what it is that they do in order to help with that critical infrastructure protection. During the course of the contract, there have been requests from the MTA to provide additional police resources. Enhancements, which are in the form of specific additional fixed post units that MTA has agreed to pay for to deal with either emerging crime trends or things that they have since prioritized since the signing of the contract. The MacArthur Park platform is a great example of that, as well as the platforms along the Red Line. Every now and then there'll be special details that they will request from the department. Usually they deal with increases in technology, changes in their infrastructure, or times when they feel that they need visible police presence in order to protect the security of their engineers as they conduct various operations throughout the system. There have been in the past where we've been called upon to utilize resources to do the sweeps of the trains as they come into the station for cleaning and making sure that everybody's off the train before they can be turned over, the closures of the stations at the end of business day, training to the contract security and MTA to increase our interoperability, and then emergency management field exercises as a region-wide disaster will affect the transit system. And so their ability to integrate with the police department as far as training communication is paramount. I'm going to turn it back over to Detective Moon, who is going to go over some of the crime as it's existed since 2017. Lieutenant, yeah, this is the update side.
So I won't bore you with all the numbers, but as you can see on the PowerPoint, how the crime trends have slowly increased from the time that we came onto the system. Now, just a part of the explanation, prior to LAPD taking over the patrol function of the metro system within the city of LA, prior agencies did not have footbeats where police presence was continuous. Once LAPD took over in 2017, we had footbeat officers throughout the Red Line that went from North Hollywood all the way down to Union Station, on the Expo line, which went to West LA, Bundy Station, all the way back into LATTC, North Union, Newton Division area. So along with that, the commuters started to become more accustomed to seeing police officers on foot at the train stations. So what happened regularly was that a crime may have occurred the day before or even a few hours prior to. The commuters didn't know what to do or who to report it to. However, they would see officers, and they became accustomed to seeing officers on the platform and would regularly come up to the officers and explain to them what had happened. The officers were, of course, available to take crime reports. And as you can see, part of the crime trends from 2017 to 2019 slowly started to increase on certain crimes. However, pandemic, of course, 2020, you'll see a decrease in a lot of the crimes due to the lack of commuters, a ridership on the MTA, and because of the shutdown. What you can see now in present day in 2021 is you'll see the increase again starting to rise. For year to date, 2021, we're almost equal to the number of crimes from 2020, and we still have 3-4 months remaining for the year. However, a lot of the crimes that are occurring, we work again in conjunction with the area detectives, as well as some of the specialized units to combat, to put out crime alerts from the train videos, from the bus videos, from the platform videos, to identify as many suspects as we can so that the commuters are much more safer. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of people who continuously come back to the train stations, platforms, and so forth, and commit numerous crimes. We are working with the city attorney's office in regards to this to try to get stay away orders, restraining orders, and so forth away from certain locations for these repetitive criminals. And one of the examples that I can explain was several years ago, we did have an individual who committed multiple sexual offenses, sexual battery, lewd conducts. This happened initially on the rail systems, the trains, the platforms, and so forth. This individual was apprehended. A city attorney's office filed charges and so forth and put a stay away order on this individual for train stations and trains itself. However, upon his release, a few months later, he started committing the same act, sexual battery, lewd conducts on buses. He was apprehended again. Additional charges were filed. City attorney was able to get as maximum sentence as possible, along with probationary status and a stay away order from all public transportation. That's all public transportation, including the airport, taxis where multiple people ride, as well as any other public transportation throughout the city. So we are working in conjunction with the city attorney's office. Currently, we work together with the neighborhood prosecutor for Central Bureau, as well as the Central Division area city prosecutor, to try to keep track of all the criminals, all the elements that continue to repeat itself, so that we can keep them away and have the commuters truly ride in a more safe environment, as well as the students. Now that the schools are back open, we want the students to feel safer riding the buses as well as the trains to and from school and to their homes.
So the division has 2 weekly crime control meetings, one of which they conduct along with all of our law enforcement partners, our security partners, so that we are exchanging information, exchanging intelligence, and coordinating activities when we see system-wide trends. We also have a crime control meeting that is internal, so that we can look to the trends that are developing and then communicate with area detectives or the area commands with which these crime trends are developing, so that we can assist with their investigative resources and adjust our deployment as the contract allows in order to deal with any of those trends and patterns that come with crime. So to conclude, moving forward, Transit Services Division is part of the transportation section of the planning for the Super Bowl for next year. There are several major openings that are expected within the next year to 2 years of extensions of the rail system, including the Crenshaw line, the airport connector, the regional connector, and the Purple Line extension, that would call for an increase in policing services with the LAPD. And most importantly, as I said in the outset, this assignment is a community engagement assignment. Getting 2 police officers wearing their hats, highly visible, out on the system to engage with the ridership public and make them feel safe about using mass transit within the city is our overarching goal. And so we intend to continue to add on to the already existing communication systems that we have, the social media platforms, the utilization of the department's media communications. We are bringing on board some new senior lead officers to get their vision about the interaction at community meetings and other functions that might be outside of the traditional discussions, just so that people have an opportunity to hear our story. We were listening earlier to some of the comments that were made, and I was the incident commander on an incident that happened here at Union Station 2 weeks ago, where a man who was in mental crisis had armed himself with an 11-inch knife and had barricaded himself in Union Station. And I sat there and I watched as communications were established, de-escalation was begun. We brought in BSS, we brought in the DMH from the SMART team, and they were able to resolve that situation through de-escalation with no use of force and no injuries. And that is the ultimate outcome that we want in all of our engagements. So with that, we will open it up to questions from the board, and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you all very much for that comprehensive overview describing the broad scope of responsibilities that Transit Division is responsible for. Thank you for all of that. Can you, and I think it might be you, Commander Graham, I'm not sure that this question is directed to, could you kindly describe And if someone could take down the PowerPoint, that would be great, so we can see everyone a little more clearly. The general relationship, the nature of the relationship with MTA overall, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues on the commission.
So this is my third month here. I came here in July along with Chief Woodyard. And I believe that our relationship with MTA from an executive level is positive, is very positive. We meet on a regular basis with our counterparts at the Sheriff's Department, Long Beach, and the MTA system. There is robust communication between the system security and law enforcement, the SSLE office, and our transit services. As you can imagine, being co-located in the same building with the Security Operations Center, there is consistent both in-person and telephonic communication between our watch commander and the SOC or the SOC. There's a lot of OCs in this MTA. There's a bus operations system, so we got a BOC, a ROC, and a SOC. So there's a lot of OC going on here. But we have communications that are established between all of them. I think we have a built-in advantage that the team that built Transit Services Bureau back in 2016 transitioned into the SSLE office. And so Ron Dickerson is still the assistant chief of SSLE. And as many of you may know, is a retired lieutenant from the Los Angeles Police Department. And so he consistently maintains his position as a liaison between the department and with the Metropolitan Transit Authority. So even on the technical side of things, our budget analysts have a daily relationship with the contract compliance officers from the MTA. So so those conversations are consistently going on, as well as the presentation and of the metrics, the KPI metrics that Lieutenant Perez had talked about. So I would describe that information as very healthy. There is a new chief of SSLA, Chief Gerhardt, as well as a new CEO of MTA, who I know has met with Chief Moore. So I know those lines of communication are wide open, and we work to continue to ensure that they are.
Thank you, Commander Graham. Commissioners, questions for the Transit Division? Questions, please. Commissioner Kalanche, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I'm intrigued about Transit Services Bureau because I've seen a lot of opportunities to take some of the things that you're doing and expand them into more widely into the department and into divisions. So one of the things that I'd like to learn more about is your success with the Hope Project, because I see that you have PATH and Peace Over Violence and some other nonprofit organizations that I feel like are woven into the work that you do. So I'm wondering like how that relationship has been successful, because it seems like it's working very well. I would love for that to be the case in all the divisions.
So while Mike is certainly the expert, and I'm going to turn it over to him in a second, just from an executive level, I think that one of the advantages that we have is that MTA contracts with PATH for directed services, and they contract with Peace Over Violence for directed services. So since we're sort of all under the family of contracted individuals who are working towards housing the homeless, it allows us to all march in the same direction. And again, when we do our interoperability meetings, representatives from that part of the house are part of the weekly meetings for interaction. But nobody knows the relationship better than Mike. So Mike,
that was one of the questions I had. If they were funded to do that work, that makes a huge difference. But I'll let you continue.
Right. So obviously I had an opportunity to see what the Hope model looked like under the city umbrella when we were working with WASA. The reality is, since we first started here, took over policing, MTA was definitely not getting a lot of support from anyone from the outside. All the services, whether they be city, county, nonprofits, faith-based, typically focused on everything outside of MTA's property, and it kind of seemed to be the expectation that they could afford their own services. So ultimately, that did lead to them contracting with PATH. They turned out to be a great partner. They can't cover the entire system the way MTA would like, because they just don't have enough personnel. And there's also challenges on off hours, nighttime, weekends. even for PATH, to get people connected to services. So having a 24/7 operation isn't necessarily going to be as successful as we'd like. For my team in particular, having learned a lot from my prior experience before coming to MTA and then putting together the team here, I mean, partnerships for us is everything. We really don't have resources other than our officers themselves. We don't have funding. We don't have any support from HUD or any other organization unless we build it through a partnership. So PATH has turned out to be a great partner. We have the immediate access because they are contracted under that same umbrella, but the officers all have great partners that they've vetted over the years that they know will take care of them. We'll do favors, we'll work around certain things that will treat everyone with a certain sense of urgency, where not everyone will. Especially on the transportation system, since so many people are on the move, you don't always have time to build rapport. You can't go back like you would, let's say, at an encampment and revisit that person several times over weeks and months and years and build a relationship and trust. You might have today to really make an impression on someone. So to help with that, that's where I came up with bringing on the DMH clinician to not only go out with my officers and do proactive engagement side by side with them, but to address a lot of the people that are suffering from mental illness and engage them pre-crisis and try to get them reconnected to outpatient services or anything else. So not only is he bringing his expertise, but he's also helping to indirectly train our officers to do basically mimic what he does, whether it be the evaluations, what's the priority, how to identify the needs versus what the client is ready for today. And then that in turn turned into my relationship with USC and their interest and my interest in bringing in the USC students, the interns that are working on their masters in social work, to basically not only learn from our clinician and our officers and get a first responder perspective, but for them to learn how to network, for them to spend some time looking at the macro. What are some of the broken system, legislation, lack of resources? Where's the funding being moved around within the city, county, state? Is it really helping? How can we have a voice in all of that? So it's a very comprehensive approach. We end up finding ourselves going down very lengthy roads and getting involved in a lot of things such as veterans, women veterans in particular, veteran suicide, transitional age youth, LGBTQ, I mean, you name it. They all have their unique, whether it be challenges, barriers, lack of resources, what have you. So because we're not funded by anyone in particular, we have the ability to move around within everyone. So very comprehensive model. It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but the officers are very motivated, dedicated. Our partners, PATH is not the only one. There's plenty of organizations or individuals within organizations that do incredible work, really incredible work. So we've got a lot of great partners that really deserve as much or more of the credit.
And it's going to continue to grow, Commissioner. As I get more comfortable in my new job, I have all the experience that I had in my old position as the homeless coordinator and the partnerships that I was fortunate enough to forge there and connect them with what we're doing over here at the MTA. So we hope to report to you in the future of the more inclusive list of partners.
I'm very impressed by your willingness to go outside of law enforcement to support with the safety in the transit system. So it's a great model. I would love to kind of see it grow. So thank you. I have one more question about the deployment. I know it's an overtime position that officers sign up for. Do you know if an officer is, like, for instance, and I'm not sure if I'm explaining this correctly, but they might work a regular shift, then they can sign up for an overtime shift, right? And then go back to their regular shift. Do you know if there's like any rules I'm worried about burnout. That's what I'm trying to. Yes.
extensive, ma'am. I'm gonna let Lieutenant Perez give you an overview of them, but yes, all of this was thought out and instituted when the co-system took over. Leonard?
So it was built out so we have transparency. So Office of Operation is our monitor regarding that, and we have a set of rules that the officers need to acknowledge before they sign up. One could be there has to be an 8-hour turnaround time in between shifts. They can't work a certain number of hours per week or per month on vacation. Those are considered violations. We, as an entity, a Transit Service Division, when we identify those, we give that information over to Office of Operations, and then they deem how they're going to sanction the officer, whether it's a 30-day ban or a 60-day ban, or contacting their commanding officer and having them take care of that necessity. But we do monitor that on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis.
Perfect. It's so important because I know it's very lucrative to want to do overtime, but then you don't want to go back to your regular assignment cranky or lack of sleep or tired. So it's really important and very thoughtful that those regulations were put into.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's it for me, Commissioner Decker.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commissioner Bonner, do you have any questions?
Yes, a couple, please. I'll try to squeeze several into maybe three if I can. One, presumably the easiest, is on the beginning of the presentation, you talked about some of the KPIs, and the question is whether those were developed solely within the department, or is the KPIs also developed in collaboration with Metro? And as a part of that question also is what is the process for getting feedback from Metro relative to those KPIs? I don't mean the KPIs themselves, but the level of service.
So to answer your question, Commissioner, those KPIs were developed in collaboration. Metro had the lead on this. We gave some feedback. We had a contract compliance officer who works for LAPD assigned to us, who mirrored with Metro's contract compliance officer. They met between the middle, they developed the KPIs, and this gets reported on the monthly report back to MTA.
So there is weekly executive management calls with the chief of SSLE, who is the point to manage the contract within the MTA. And so when those monthly metrics come out, the feedback is then shared with us at that point as to whether or not MTA finds that to be standard, or whether or not we need to make strategic decisions to change our the outcomes for those KPIs.
Got it. Okay. And then this next question, which is a couple, I think, into one, but I'm just observing, the system itself is somewhat diverse between all of the dynamics along the red line, and then you compare that to Westlake, MacArthur Park, which is a lot of gang activity, street vendors, homeless, things of that nature, and then of course the Expo line, which is part of the system, but mostly at grade, I believe, along the entire route as well. So question is, and I think my information, I was trying to squint and add up the numbers from the chart you showed on the crime, but I think my latest information was about just short of 10,000 Part 1 and Part 2 crimes on the system since 2017, roughly. And I think a good chunk of that was on the red line. But when I'm pointing out, you have these three kind of at least different types of facilities, if you will. Is the balance of crime any greater on, say, the system itself? Say, more people experiencing some sort of criminal activity on a bus or on a train, or is it at the state, waiting at a station location, or some other fixed kind of location?
I think we can safely say that the crime trend, if we see the location or areas of the crimes, for example, like Union Station is our #1 area for crimes. A multi-variety of everything from your misdemeanors, lewd conduct, indecent exposure, sexual battery, to your higher robbery, assault with deadly weapons such as knives and so forth. Union Station gets majority of the crimes in overall view in itself. The next number of crimes would probably be on the bus itself, bus and bus stops. Unfortunately, we can't manage the bus stops and per contract in the sense of what MTA is asking us to do is not to manage the bus stops, but to manage the buses itself. However, in our view, they're almost related. By doing the buses and so forth, ultimately our bus rider team goes to each bus stop and so forth, exits, wait for the next several buses and so forth, and then enters that bus and continues on with the enforcement. So those are our top 3 locations of where crimes occur: Union Station and the bus and bus stops. However, if we're talking about just the lines overall, as you mentioned, the red line is the most in the sense of crimes, because the red line connects Union Station, Civic Center, Pershing Square, 7th and Metro, Westlake MacArthur Park, which are very high density in the sense of what you spoke about in regards to homelessness, the number of people and commuters and so forth. Another high location is at the end of the red line, which is North Hollywood Station. North Hollywood Station, because it shares with the Orange Line bus stop, we have more commuters as well as homeless that visit and actively take those public transportation. So red line in itself overall from Union Station all the way to North Hollywood is the most active in the sense of crime. The other train stations such as Expo Line, as you mentioned, Gold Line, Blue Line, those areas are more not underground but above ground, so it's more open to the public, where people standing on the platform are visible to the vehicles that are traveling east and west or north and south along the routes of the train. So the crime rate comparable to a red line is much less on those locations. I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It certainly does. And certainly in the time that we have, I'm going to be checking in with you at some point soon to talk a little further about that, the overall crime picture. So I'll come back to that later in another context. Two last questions, either maybe for the detective. One is when you are from the arrests that are being made or the leads that you follow up on, are the perpetrators of the crime, is there any rhyme or reason? Are you finding them to be individuals who are somewhat, from a local area who simply get on the system in a certain location in order to perpetrate a crime, or are they people who, are transitory in some, in some way, shape, or form? And I'm not speaking about being transient necessarily. I'm just saying, are they people who get on the system in one part of the city, ride to another part of the city in order to commit a crime? Or are they people who are from an area that, say close to Union Station, close to the red line, who use the system as a, opportunistic, venue for committing a crime?
Yes, in fact, we have evidence for both. So we've had, when we monitor the arrestees, of course, we know where their home addresses and so forth. So we've had arrestees that live in different parts of the city or throughout the city that have been arrested in North Hollywood Division for robberies, for grand theft person, and other violent crimes. We've had trends on the Expo Line where we've had our what we call robbery crews or grand theft person crews who are targeting specific people, not paying attention, using their cell phones or any other electronic device, and are committing these crimes as they're riding, like you say, just taking the trains from one location to another. So we have evidence of both.
Okay, thank you. And then last question for today is relative to data. The two questions. One is the crime data that was, that we've been talking about here, is that captured and integrated in, how is that factored into the CompStat data is one question. And then related to that, I suppose, is from the use of force statistics. Are those tracked and just integrated with the overall statistics that we see, or are they tracked separately? I know that, for example, the Safe LA data is kind of, off into a different category or something. So what about the data that comes from the transit system?
So we use the CAM system to generate our crime information. So we utilize the same system that the rest of the department uses, and the same use of force tracking system that the department uses to track from teams to track uses of force.
Okay, and we'll talk about the reporting part of it. So you track it. That means that's how you track it. But are you reporting it? You know, the use of force data that we see, for example, does that fully capture all of the transit services data as well?
Yes, sir. We use the same systems as all the other operational divisions. We have a CompStat profile that CompStat comes out with our comparative statistics.
Got it. Thank you. By the way, one last question that that comes to mind also is, what is the? I know we're going to get a briefing sometime soon on guns, but what is the experience relative to the number of guns you might find on the system in any given day or over any given period of time?
Surprisingly, the guns are low. We had in the last few years had several murders on the transit system. However, majority of those murders have been done by other weapons than guns, such as a metal pole, knives. Knives are very prevalent on the transit system. We've arrested multiple people just for brandishing their knives. And now there are those who carry knives legally, of course, but we've had multiple arrests for just brandishing. We've had multiple arrests for ADW, stabbings, and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Sure appreciate the information. And as I said, I'll look forward to coming to spend some more time with you sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Soboroff, any questions, sir?
Just one quick one. Because of COVID and because students are being allowed now to travel and encouraged to take the trains for free and everything else, does that have any bearing on your safety strategies or anything else? It should be increased ridership of younger people.
So Commissioner Lieutenant Perez, we just had a meeting 2 weeks ago with USC Assistant Chief Burke and Chief John Thomas. It was also in conjunction with Southwest Detectives, spearheading knowing that school's opening up soon at different locations, getting together and trying to get the message out there regarding our #1 grand thefts is these cell phones, getting ahead of it, creating a task force and addressing the crimes on both ends so we can help each other out.
I'm more concerned. I'm more concerned. They have a way to take care, to be very proactive, and they're wonderful. But I'm concerned about LAUSD students that have been newly encouraged and not required to make any payments to use the system. I wonder if there's outreach with LAUSD and with school kids.
Yeah, and school police wasn't involved in the meeting as they were last year and the year before. They were part of the task force. Regards to the no fee for the students, that really hasn't impacted us crime-wise.
Okay, good. Well, it's a much safer system than it was before we got involved. I remember it before. I've seen it now, and I'm sure that it matures and has different changes as time goes on to make it better, but it's a much safer system now, thanks to what you guys do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners, all, and thank you to Transit Services Bureau for that very detailed presentation. We certainly do appreciate it. Thank you, all of you, for your time and the detail you provided today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Madam.
Madam Secretary, we'll move on the agenda then. And colleagues, just to be aware, one of our colleagues has a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So ideally, I'd like to complete the agenda, the open session agenda before that time if possible. And so I'd ask you to plan accordingly, and as well as our presenters to please plan accordingly. That brings us to item 5C on the agenda. And I believe Deputy Chief Reyna will be presenting on that. Chief Reyna, we have read the materials provided to us in advance and would just ask you to give a very brief summary of what it is that's before us.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everybody. Goal number 5 of the department's strategic plan discusses researching virtual technology to enhance our training. In summary, the Chief of Police directed Training Bureau to research different virtual reality software that's available on the market. In that research, we were able to identify VArmed as a company that's based out of New York City currently. that has the software and the capabilities that we're looking for. At the same time, the Police Foundation had agreed to fund the software and the system for us. There was a private donor. I just want to mention that had donated a good portion of that money to the Police Foundation. And caveat of that is the donor wanted to make sure that this software was capable of enhancing our de-escalation training and our training relative to our mental health intervention, along with other tactical situations that the training can provide for us. A contingent of us went to New York City and visited the VRM site. We actually put on the gear. We actually went into the training scenarios, and I have to say, absolutely incredible training. It's super immersive. You're in this virtual world. The technology and the options for us is incredible. State-of-the-art technology. Some of the things I just want to discuss quickly is, again, that immersion into the virtual reality system, 10 officers at a time working together in conjunction. The software is pre-programmed with avatars that will respond to your commands. It also has the capability of inserting what we call human avatars. So an instructor would become an avatar and can have that discussion back and forth with you, which would enhance our de-escalation techniques and our mental health intervention techniques and scenarios. The scenarios are, in a sense, endless. The computer graphics are incredible. They can launch you from one room to another. The scenario can go on. There's scenarios such as being in a subway platform. There's scenarios being in an office building, in a high school, in a park. There's all different situations when they could just the click of a button can immerse you into that situation. One of the benefits of that is normally in our tactical training, we're at our village at Davis Academy or Legion Park, or trying to find abandoned buildings or a school that's not being used or a campus and office building for that training. This virtual reality will put us right in there immediately. The system is going to be set up at a Legion Park gymnasium. It'll be there permanently. We have an agreement with LAPRAC and the use of that gymnasium. We plan on training our entire department, but obviously starting with our operational folks first as we go through that training. Some of the things that it can also do, there's biofeedback. It can tell you your heart rate. It can track your eyes to see what you're looking at. Gun flagging, which is a term for when you're covering other officers or people with your gun, that immediate feedback through the technology. Also has a capability of body-worn video to discuss whether or not you're activating your body-worn video in certain situations. And there's the immediate feedback. It's all, in a sense, recorded in the virtual world. We can walk the officers through to explain what they did right, what they did wrong, and how they can enhance their training. Again, I talked about the avatar roles, the commands that are already pre-programmed, and what the human avatar can do, which is different than our FOSS machine. I believe a lot of the commissioners have been through the FOSS, which is kind of just that situation where they just talk and they're saying the same things. This is an interactive back and forth, which it really, really enhances our capabilities. And again, as the technology is new, especially with the newer officers we're bringing on, and I grew up with, Atari and pinball machines and things like that, and the new generation grew up with PlayStations and Xboxes, and it's similar to that. Just the graphics and the enhancement is incredible, which is being tuned with our newer officers coming on the job and their training. And again, this is first in the nation. No one has have VR'd yet. NYPD is looking at that. We actually worked with NYPD when we were there in New York City. They were there testing the system first. So having this system will propel us again as the leaders of training in law enforcement across the country, and we'll be the first department in the country to have this training. I truly, truly feel that it's incredible. It's going to be great for our personnel. It's going to propel us to the front again in the training and the leaders we are in the training in law enforcement.
Thank you, Chief Reyna. Much appreciated. Commissioners, questions? Questions for Chief Reyna, if any? I do not see any questions from commissioners. Thank you, Chief Reyna. You did a comprehensive review. Much appreciated. I will move forward the recommended board action, which is to approve the report and transmit to the mayor and city council for acceptance. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye, please. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Reyna.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That concludes the regular agenda, and that means the only matter left is the matter I put at the end of the agenda, to which I'll be recused. That's item 4A, and I will turn it over to Commissioner Soboroff, and I will be leaving the meeting and meeting my colleagues in closed session. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Item number 4A is up, and let's see, is there a presentation that we've read the report, we've heard the public comments, we know what the action is. Is there anyone at the, first of all, are there any questions from any of the commissioners? And if there are,
yes, sir.
Chief Pitcher would be here to respond.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Chief, I'm Deputy Chief Chris Pitcher. I am the Chief of Detectives. Just to bring you up to speed with your indulgence very quickly, in 2018, the Bureau of Justice Assistance awarded the department a $700,000 grant to develop innovative techniques to analyze data from its homicide casebooks to construct a new instrument that is mathematically based that will improve case solvability in the field. The original grant, it partnered the department with the University of California at Los Angeles and Justice Security Strategies and Dr. Craig Uchida to develop this new process as well as the instrument. However, UCLA was unable to ultimately contract with the department, necessitating this modification of the grant funds totaling $150,000 that will be transferred to, with your approval, of course, to JNSS to continue the development of this process in the instrument. Also worth note, FBI is involved in this effort, although they are not a grantee, but they are a partner with the department in the development of this instrument and the process. Essentially, JSS is going to employ statistical methods to determine how to solve the unsolved homicides. The primary characteristics of solved homicide cases will be determined through this process, then compared with the unsolved cases. And once developed, these mathematical characteristics will be discussed with current homicide investigators from all of the bureaus to develop a new instrument to improve case solvability in the field. And just to date, as the grant is being used, the department and JSS have fulfilled the following to accomplish the grant objectives with the assistance of the FBI. They have created the homicide database, which this will be based off of. It's called the Homicide Library System, and it will, once operational, allow access to the homicide detectives from across the city to all of the cases that are contained within. They have located, scanned, and stored over 4,000 homicide casebooks from Operations South Bureau. That covers a period of 1990 to 2009, or 20 years. And over 1,500 of those 4,000 homicide casebooks, they are unsolved. That's why the decision was made to start here in Operation South Bureau, because of the proportionality of unsolved cases. The department and JSS continually works with the homicide library staff to locate, recover, organize, and scan the remaining homicide books from the other 3 geographic bureaus to develop this case database upon which the mathematical characteristics will be derived from to develop, hopefully, this solvability incident and work on the unsolved cases as well as those in the field that are occurring. Last but not least, with the money, Dr. Uchida has advised that they're in the process of purchasing 5 high-performance scanners that will soon be purchased for use at the homicide library to continue this scanning process so that all homicide books can ultimately be processed and put into this database and accessible by homicide investigators throughout the city. So I'm available for your questions.
Questions, Commissioner Bonner?
Thank you very much. One question is, why was UCLA not able to be awarded the contract?
So there was a discussion and they had an issue with the MOU language, and it related basically to they couldn't agree on the language dealing with the publications, the ownership of the publications and the intellectual property. And so they decided not to contract with the department.
Okay. All right. And then the other question is in terms of the 1,500 or so unsolved homicides, and I'm thinking about much of what we've discussed over the months or years about some of the difficulties in solving some of the homicides, South LA or elsewhere, but oftentimes that's characterized as an issue with a lack of cooperation on the part of witnesses or the public who might have witnessed, something and doesn't come forward. How will this? What I'm trying to understand really is give us an example or two of how this scanning all these cases and putting them in the library will maybe lead to more solved cases.
I think one, that's a great way to basically put all of the cases in one location and keep them there. But two, with this instrument, potentially it has the availability or the ability rather to look at the commonalities between those cases that were solved and ultimately apply those to the cases that were unsolved, to look at other means to solve these cases and to go back and look at potentially other suspects who had committed these offenses where the cases were solved and extrapolate those forward to the unsolved cases. So it's a different perception, a different way of looking at the cases, to go back and look at the solve rate.
If I could add, Commissioner, there's also a number of questions we don't know to ask, and meaning that this analysis is meant to digitize records that are in the thousands to see what type of relationships, whether the correlations are causal or they're just happenstance. Also including in this is the investigative path of these investigations. Did the amount of investigative work on the front end or later cold case retrieval, was DNA, what role did it play? Initially, this work, which is a decade old, in the homicide library, was an initiative that the foundation began supporting nearly a decade ago, was hoping to find an interaction between suspects or individuals, offenders that were actually involved in multiple homicides. That has not really come to fruition, but we do believe there are other models across the country that have researched what are the characteristics of a homicide that we can solve more quickly and what strategies work and prove a better and higher solve rate, bringing justice to victims and their families. And this is a scientific effort and a academic effort to bring perceptions or gut instincts into reality and to actually formally articulate it in a fact that will stand up to scrutiny.
When might we know the answer to that question? What I mean is in terms of whether or not this actually does lead to the solving more homicides. I mean, because one of my first reactions was something you referenced generally was I could see this as being helpful if you're looking for someone who has committed multiple homicides or those kind of situations where you can track information, how it was done, and a lot of different things. But in terms of the kinds of very localized things that we see happening today, whether it's somebody reacting to something on social media, whether it's a turf kind of situation or something like that, again, where one of the barriers is just getting people who might have information to come forward. How is what kind of data is going to be captured in this system that's going to allow somebody to be in a better position to solve a crime? I'm happy to. I'd like to. There's a short answer here. We can take that, but if not, I may just need to come and understand a little bit more about your operation chief picture, and really how this you involve operationalizing this in some practical way.
I have two of the researchers on the call today. They can answer your questions with the specifics of how they feel that these mathematical algorithms, may help in terms of, developing the investigations, the things, once again, that the chief said that we don't look at, that we do look at the commonalities, and ultimately they want to come up with that instrument to be able to increase the chance for solvability in the field, as well as to go back. But I can have them answer that if you would like, the very specifics in what they're looking for, that they feel they hope to garner off of, this type of effort.
Yeah, I think we have a couple minutes, so there's something that help. Let's hear it.
So I have Miss Helena Melendez and also Sean Cato are here to discuss either one, if you would like to field that.
Are they on a panel, Chris, Chief Pitcher, or have they been moved up to a panel so they can speak?
I believe they have. They're not with me in the office, but they were on the call. If the commission secretary might look at Helena Melendez and Mr. Sean Cato. From
She's attempting to locate them now.
JSS. Yes, they are on the call. There you go. Miss Melendez? There you, sir. Miss Melendez and Mr. Cato are on the call for you.
Great. I can see them. I don't hear anything.
Eliana, you can go.
Yes, so Commissioner Bonner, what was your question?
Generally speaking, the question really is, how is capturing the kind of data that's going to be captured and stored? How, just give us an example or two of how that might really help in solving the kinds of unsolved homicides that we were just discussing, which is namely something, local in a community. Maybe you had witnesses who don't want to cooperate for whatever reasons. How is having this kind of data and technology going to help solve more of those crimes?
Yes, so the Homicide Library System, or HLS, captures the most important sections or the most important information from the murder books themselves. So victim information, suspect information, details about the case itself, whether evidence was collected, that sort of thing. And so being able to extract that and being able to analyze it helps us determine what were the key characteristics of those that were solved versus those that are unsolved. So for example, if we have DNA evidence that was collected in a solved case and was analyzed, but you have that evidence that perhaps was marked as potentially DNA evidence in an unsolved one, but nothing was done with it, we can identify that, do our analysis, and then perhaps direct detectives to look at those cases that have potential DNA evidence, could have ballistics evidence, for example, that could have additional analysis conducted on, or additional investigations conducted.
Anything else to add to that, Mr. Cato? No.
Just to kind of add on to the timeline, because I think you were asking a little bit about that. One of the things that is because UCLA had to back out the work on the statistical model has been kind of put on hold essentially until these funds are reallocated. We have a partner with Indiana University that we were planning on working with to kind of fulfill that role, but that specific part of the project has not really begun yet because of that kind of reorganization that's had to be done.
Okay, sure, appreciate that. And Chief Pitcher, I'll come talk to you.
Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kalanche, any questions before we vote?
I just had a quick question, Chief Pitcher. Is any potential suspect information, pictures put into this, I would assume some sort of digital database that then could be used, I don't know, for things that we wouldn't want it to be used? I'm still trying to understand the database, but.
So the homicide library database, ma'am, is essentially inclusive of everything that is in a homicide book. And that would be leads, that would be photographs, that would be everything that would be in a binder, which could be anywhere from 5 inches thick to 4 or 5 of those. That will all be in that binder as to leads that were followed, people that were discussed, talked to, interviewed, all of that will be in there. But keep in mind that each of these cases are protected, they are confidential in nature, and ultimately that there is control to that access for the homicide library system, much like all of the other systems that contain sensitive information. They are all confidential.
Yes, I just wanted to find out or make sure like who had access to that information.
It is controlled, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
You're welcome.
With no other questions, I will make a motion to approve the department's report regarding this item 4A and transmit it to the mayor and city council pursuant to the correspondence that we have. We have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes 3-0. Mr. Teefank, it's time for us now to go into closed session. Anything that I should be saying or you want to say before we go?
Yes, give it to the board secretary. She'll announce us going to closed session.
Okay, go ahead.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 5A and 5B in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Very well. Mr. Teefank, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, very good. We've returned from closed session, and I'll ask Mr. Teefank to do a readout of the closed session, please.
Commission has concluded its work in closed session. Commissioner Soboroff, for the record, was not in closed session. Item 6A, officer involved shooting 052-20. The chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted on a 3-0 vote. Those recommendations were tactical debrief, 1 police officer 3 and 1 police officer 2. Administrative disapproval, 1 sergeant 2, 2 sergeant 1s, 1 police officer 3, 1 police officer 2, 1 police officer 1. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 sergeant 1s, 2 police officer 3s, 2 police officer 2s. Lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 3. As relates to item 6B, adjudicated on a unanimous vote of 3-0. That concludes the report out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Teefank. The only matter pending is for us to adjourn. I will move that we as a board adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. We stand adjourned until our next scheduled board meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.